Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're glad to have you aboard for this FCC forum, the Information Needs of Atlanta. I'm Jeff Ellinger from the NBC affiliate, 11 Alive, and I've spent about the last 30 years in Atlanta media doing a number of different duties, some of them good, some of them not so good, but I'm pleased to be your friendly moderator tonight. I am the timekeeper and sort of the sheriff, if you will. The only request that we have is courtly demeanor, and don't make any speeches. Make your point, get your point, and move on. We've got a lot of subjects to cover tonight. We have a lot of people that want to be heard, and this is a wonderful opportunity for those voices to be heard with our FCC commissioners that are in attendance tonight, Michael J. Cox and Mignon Clyde. So we are looking forward to this forum, and we just want to make sure that everybody is heard, and everybody's opinion counts, and everybody makes their point and makes it hard and moves on. So that's sort of the goal tonight, and that is sort of my role. So I am your sheriff in residence. So let us begin with a video welcome by Congressman John Lewis.
Good evening. I'm pleased and delighted to welcome you to this unbelievable meeting here on the campus of Georgia Tech. I want to thank the president of Georgia Tech for making this beautiful facility available for this meeting. We're more than lucky, but we're very blessed to have two members of the Federal Communication Commission here with us today. Commissioner Clyde and Commissioner Cox, along with Atlanta Mayor Jeff Fuller. It is my hope that you will have a lively discussion and debate. I regret very much that I cannot be with you tonight. I'm in Washington participating in necessary votes. But we should take the time out and listen, raise questions, and engage in the necessary debate and discussion that we should have at this time. The people in America have a right to the best news, best programs, the very best public airways have to offer. The news is more than shooting, robbery, people been arrested, in jail. Television is more than traffic and accident. We should tell the entire story. Television, communication should be a reflection of the total community. Georgia is a very diverse state. Metro Atlanta is a very diverse urban center. We're black, we're white, we're Latino, we're Asian American, and we are Native American. We're one people, we're one family, we're one house. We all live in the same house. And we must see ourselves. We must see ourselves on television, on the radio. It is important that we have a complete narrative, a complete discussion, a complete debate of what is happening in our communities, in our neighborhoods. We should have some good stories. Some good things are happening in our public schools. We all like to see the very best. So let's go for it. Let's find a way during the next 2 hours or more to speak up, speak out, and put the spotlight where the spotlight should be placed, and bring it to the attention of Commissioner Klein and Commissioner Cox. These are the people that will be making some of the decisions that will affect the area here in Georgia and around our nation. So again, thank you so much for being here. I wish you well.
I'd like to introduce Commissioner Michael Cox. This is his final forum as he is going to retire very soon. He has been on the Washington scene since 1970 with Senator Chris Collins, the Democrat from South Carolina. And during his years on the commission, has been highlighted by a strong defense of public interest and the outreach to what he calls non-traditional stakeholders in the decisions of the FCC, particularly minorities, Native Americans, and disability communities. And he also has sought action to stem the tide of what is regarded as excessive consolidation in the nation's media and telecommunications industry, which is a subject near and dear to many broadcasters' hearts, and certainly near and dear to the hearts of the public as well, with consolidation coming in the mid-90s. Now it's totally changed the landscape of broadcasting and radio and television throughout the United States. Commissioner Cox, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Sure. Certainly. One of the great things about being the FCC commissioner, you make the rules. So how should we do this now?
I think Mignon would like to do it.
Would you like to speak first? All right. And let me introduce to you Mignon Clyburn, Commissioner of the Federal Communications Commission, and she too is from South Carolina, has her roots there. She was nominated as a member of the Federal Communications Commission in 2009, sworn in on August 3rd, 2009, and the term will run until 2012. She has an awesome resume and involved in issues relating to diversity all throughout the United States and media as well.
Thank you. I have the congressman in my background there. That's looking over me. So that's what we do here. Thank you for that introduction and good afternoon. I'm extremely pleased to join all of you today, but I'm especially ecstatic about the opportunity to get outside of D.C. Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Fabulous. Thank you. I apologize for that technical glitch. You would think I would know better being at the Federal Communications Commission, but obviously not. Again, good evening, everyone. I'm extremely pleased to join all of you today, but I'm especially ecstatic about the opportunity to get outside of D.C., back into the Deep South, and near to where I call home. While the FCC is an incredible place to work and to make a real difference for all Americans, engagements like these allow public servants like me an opportunity to see the impact of their decisions. I'm especially grateful for Congressman John Lewis and his commitment to this evening, and I am especially pleased to be joined with Commissioner Michael Cox, who is an incredible public servant and good friend. The issues we tee up today are of paramount importance to us, your community, and to our future. Atlanta's information needs may differ from where I call home, but we all stand to benefit from the sharing of innovative ideas, opportunities, and solutions, and from learning more about the unique challenges found by entrepreneurs, reporters, bloggers, station owners, and the creative and dedicated citizens here in this room. Today, we may be faced with many barriers, but there are also many incredible opportunities for communities to access information. Technology is advancing at a rapid pace, and as regulators, we often find ourselves struggling to adjust and adapt. Today's smartphones will soon be mocked as tomorrow's dumb phones, long before we acquaint ourselves with all of the menu options and applications in that particular device. And let us not forget that these rapid advances present ongoing challenges for those of us committed to closing the digital divide, which is actually growing because that goalpost is constantly moving down the field. So what does that last particular point have to do with today's focus? Innovation is affecting the way media stations report and how we as individuals consume information. The FCC's Future of the Media report states, the news and information landscape, fueled primarily by broadband-enabled innovation, is more vibrant than ever before. Digital technology is creating a world of opportunity to keep the public informed in ways that were unimaginable just a few short years ago. The report further notes that breakthroughs in hyper-local news and citizen journalism are on the rise, empowering individuals with a wealth of new information. That information can serve to better inform decision-making and engender a more accountable local and federal government. But many in those communities are now grappling with a situation where they feel that they have more access to information but get less news, and that there is a threat of information overload but not as much practical engagement. Even though the internet and mobile devices have opened up new opportunities for consumption, recent statistics show that 74% of Americans turn to broadcast TV more frequently than any other source for local news. Local news broadcasts continue to be the go-to source for weather information and are less likely than other programming to be recorded via a DVR for future viewing. It's where people go for the latest news on investigations into the local school board or city council. It's where people go to learn how recent heavy rains have affected our roads and our businesses. The fact remains that local news providers serve a vital role in our communities. Local newspapers, which are close to my heart, play a significant and intimate role too, often offering in-depth investigative reporting and updates that are unique to their readers. As community members, local reporters often understand local history and can engage in community dialogues that happen within our important community institutions. They have the ability to show us the good things happening just outside of our door, whether they are covering volunteer activities, charitable events, local sports, or other positive news stories about our friends, neighbors, and coworkers. But are they really performing those functions? Is the breadth and quality of news broadcasts and printed stories not what it used to be due to the evaporation of many of their traditional sources of revenue? Are reporters becoming increasingly isolated from the communities they are assigned to cover, paid increasingly lower wages, or are they writing only a fraction of the content they used to produce? What is the community impact of those massive reporter layoffs? Many smaller and even some larger newspaper and radio stations are extremely strapped for cash, so in order for them to survive, should they be combined or absorbed into larger and healthier conglomerates? Or if that is the answer, would that in reality remove an independent voice from the airwaves or from the newsstands? And are there enough diverse voices at these properties and in news content on the whole? And when I say diverse, I mean gender diversity as well. The sad truth is that data on minority and female ownership and management of TV and radio stations is slim, and until we have a handle on the specifics of the state of minority and female ownership and management, few concrete solutions can be drawn, and few solutions even if they are warranted and wanted, can be instituted. You have made great sacrifices to be here this evening, so I want to thank you again for joining us. Your interest in community media needs is what fuels my interest, and for that I am grateful. So as the Congressman recommended, let's have a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Clyburn, thank you very much. Now, Commissioner Copps, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir.
On your final journey here to many of these forums around the United States. We're glad to have you in Atlanta this afternoon.
The curtain is closing here, you can say. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you all for coming this evening. It is wonderful to be back in Atlanta and to be talking with you again about the future of the media. This is a conversation you and I began with a forum back in 2003, if memory serves me correctly. Tonight is a wonderful opportunity for me to re-engage and to get up to date on what's been going on here more recently. It is especially nice to be in the home district of Congressman John Lewis, one of our nation's true heroes, and someone who's been a champion for equal justice for all throughout his long and productive life. I want to thank him personally and his office for making this event possible, and thanks for his heartfelt message that we all had the privilege of listening to a few minutes ago. I'm also very pleased to be here with my colleague in the Federal Communications Commission, Mignon Clyburn, who has proven herself to be an ardent defender of the public interest and who has joined in the crusade to get America the media it needs to sustain our civic dialogue and to enhance our democracy. I'm privileged to be here with her tonight and privileged to call her friend. And of course, deep thanks go to Georgia Tech for hosting this event and for providing us with the facilities to convene this important discussion. This is a wonderful venue, and thanks for all the help that they have provided. This forum is in one way bittersweet for me because I'm set to leave the FCC at the end of the month, and this will be my last stop outside the Beltway before I take leave of Mignon and my other colleagues. Over my 10 years at the Commission, I have made it my priority to get out of Washington and engage citizens in conversations on what is needed from our media to inform not just this community, but every community across the land. I participated in dozens and dozens of hearings, town hall gatherings, public forums of all kinds from coast to coast, from huge cities to Indian country, from south to north and all directions in between. And here's what I've learned. I've learned that people want more from the media than they're getting. That many of you and your neighbors and the person down the street have serious concerns about the media you are receiving on a daily basis. That the huge cutbacks we have seen in newsrooms and the number of journalists plying their trade is not serving this democracy well. That something valuable and precious has gone missing, and that a lot of people, millions of people, want to repair what's broken. A number of years ago, the then chairman of the FCC wanted to loosen our media ownership rules that limited the number of stations that one company could own. It was an absolutely horrible idea, highly detrimental to diversity of voices and viewpoints, damaging to the preservation of localism and to the advancement of competition that our media so desperately needs. But they told me nobody cares about it outside the confines of Washington, D.C. and the Beltway. It's too technical. It's too arcane. We can handle it here. Well, my fellow commissioner at that time, Jonathan Adelstein, and I begged to differ. And we took to the road. And we attended hearing after hearing, long into the night, listening to people, hearing their concerns, and suddenly we saw around us a movement building for a better media. And 3 million people contacted the Commission and the Congress saying Chairman Powell's rules were exactly the wrong way to go. So the Senate voted to disapprove what he managed to ram through the Commission in spite of the popular outcry. The House was debating, and then the Third Circuit Court told us the rules were flawed in substance, flawed in process, and they sent them back to the FCC where we're still talking about them. But there's an important point here, and it's that citizen action can still count, even in these times when so few people wield such outrageous power. Citizens can still make a difference. You just try to tell John Lewis that grassroots movements don't work. To make a long story short, here, to my way of thinking, is what went wrong with the media. The story has a private sector part, and it has a public sector part. For 30 years and more, private sector media consolidation has seen more and more broadcast outlets bought up by the hundreds as a few mega media companies gobbled up small, local, independent entities and created huge empires where they could standardize programming, cut back on what Wall Street considered non-essential parts of their business, like spending on hard news and reflecting the diversity of their communities of service, all the while trying to show the captains of industry that they were subservient to the bottom line and the quarterly report. Stakeholders, that's the people the stations are supposed to serve. That's you and me. You go to the back of the bus, it's the stockholders who go to the front, and that became the new modus operandi. It was and is a far cry from the original broadcaster commitment to serve the public interest in return for free use of the people's airwaves. The result has been hundreds of newsrooms shuttered, thousands of reporters walking the street in search of a job rather than walking the beat in search of a story, and real hard-hitting investigative journalism put on the endangered species list. Real news too often replaced by glitzy infotainment, hard facts by shouted opinions, and local and regional music by stultifying, creativity-killing playlists and national music homogeneity. Even those station owners who tried to resist, and there were many who did, and who still do, who still try to serve the public interest, even they came under incredible pressure to cave. It made it much harder for them to do their job and to be good stewards of the public airwaves that many of them still want to be. And even today, the speculative fires burn on, and we see merger after merger. We see Comcast, NBCU, Cumulus and Citadel, Sinclair buying up more stations. As soon as the economy starts getting better, you're going to see even more of it. To make this the perfect storm, though, the private sector debacle was blessed and even encouraged by the public sector. And this, to me, is the saddest part of the tale. The place where I work, the Federal Communications Commission, was at the center of it all, blessing the consolidation tsunami, seldom finding a merger they didn't like, and then making things even worse by eliminating almost all of the public interest guidelines and enforcement that once upon a time we had on the books, rules and procedures that had been fought for and won by generations of media reformers. And when the internet and the promise of a new media came along, the two previous FCCs to this one helped the big companies travel down the same misguided road that radio and TV and cable had gone down. Consolidation blessed by government, no real public interest oversight, and access to perhaps the most dynamic and opportunity-creating technology ever devised put into the hands of a few huge telecommunications giants. I don't think we want the future of the internet to be cableization. New media offers tremendous opportunities, but it is not anywhere close to being on autopilot to rescue us from the wreckage of traditional media. There could be a wonderful new town square of democracy on the internet, paved with broadband bricks. But truth be told, 90 to 95% of the news that we read on the internet every day still originates in that traditional newspaper newsroom and the TV broadcast newsroom. It's just that there's so much less of it than there used to be. And while there are all sorts of interesting experiments and innovations taking place on the internet, so far there is no model to support the kind of resource-intensive journalism that democracy really requires. And we haven't yet replaced in new media what we've lost in traditional. So it is that we find ourselves at the present moment with radio and TV news and information just shells of their former selves, shilling programs that encourage a dumbed-down civic dialogue based too often on fluff. And to my way of thinking, democracy is not well served by fluff. A well-informed electorate is the premise and prerequisite of functioning self-government. Right now, your country and mine faces some really deadly, serious challenges. Our economy founders. Our global competitiveness has lost its edge. Nearly a fifth of the workforce is unemployed or underemployed. Our education lags and our teachers suffer as much as the kids. 50 million Americans have no health insurance. If we don't have a media that can dig for facts, cover the beats, separate fact from opinion, hold the powerful accountable, then tell me, please, how in the world are we going to meet and master these challenges? How are we going to ever overcome? To me, getting our journalism and our media right is step number one in getting our democracy right. And you know, there's a real irony here. When the actions of government weaken the fourth estate, as has happened over these past 3 decades, there's less of a check on government itself. The estimable David Simon, creator of The Wire and former journalist at the Baltimore Sun, hit the nail on the head recently when he said, quote, "The next 10 or 15 years in this country are going to be a halcyon era for state and local political corruption," end quote. And it's going to take a lot more vibrant and vigorous journalism than we have now to keep that from coming true. But it's not just the accountability stories or the things gone wrong stories that need to be told. As Congressman Lewis so movingly pointed out, there's good news out there too, although we don't get to see a lot of it on TV. You live in a diverse community with lots of people doing lots of interesting and often lots of very good things. How often do those stories manage to get through the if it bleeds, it leads mentality that seems to dictate so much news? I'm a strong believer that if we want more diversity in our stories, if we want to understand what's really going on in our communities, then we need more diversity in who owns our media outlets. But here's the reality of ownership diversity. In a nation that is now 1/3 minority, people of color hold only about 3.5% of full power commercial television stations. So should we really be surprised that we see in our media things that don't even come close to what's actually happening in our communities? Talk about an area where the Commission needs to take some positive action to break down barriers. And there it is. There are so many abuses out there. Here's another example. Some broadcasters are doing end runs around our media ownership limits by way of so-called shared services agreements. That's just kind of a fancy term for covert consolidation that lets one company control and manage another company without formally transferring the title or the ownership. It's something we should not tolerate. But just last week, our Media Bureau actually dismissed a complaint against a shared service agreement, even while admitting that the arrangement was at odds with the purpose and intent of our rules on duopolies. You got to figure that one out. I can't. I guess we'll get to it later. But it just seemed to me that this might have been a case where we should have acted on behalf of the public interest instead of kicking the can down the road. There's one final issue. I'm going to hush. It's about all those political ads we're subjected to on television and the lack of clarity and transparency that surrounds them. And get ready, we got 11 months ahead of us now with carpet-bombing political ad saturation like we've never seen before. We are not well served when those who are attempting to manipulate our political dialogue and trying to determine the outcome of elections through these ads can disguise themselves and hide behind misleading names. If there's a group calling itself Citizens for Purple Mountain Majesties, and it's in reality the mouthpiece of a company that's refusing to clean up a toxic dump or is spewing garbage into one of the Great Lakes, don't citizens have a right to know that? Open government can only exist where people and groups trying to influence elections stand up and tell us who they are and who is footing the bill for those ads. And that's not happening often enough, and the fissures in our democracy are only going to widen if anonymous money retains its unchecked influence in our elections. The FCC has the authority to do something about it right now, and it's time to use that authority and to require a fuller sponsorship identification of the special interests who are bankrolling so many of these ads. I'll leave you with this. 40 years in Washington have convinced me that while some change, sometimes important change, can come from the top down, real change comes from the grassroots up. It comes because the people demand it and mobilize to make it happen. Abraham Lincoln was a great president, but there would have been no Emancipation Proclamation without the abolitionists and other reformers who demanded action. Franklin Roosevelt is my personal hero, but there would have been no Social Security and other New Deal programs without labor organizations, consumer groups, and a host of other reform advocates pressing him to move ahead. John F. Kennedy came to support civil rights, but there would have been no such conversion without Martin Luther King and John Lewis and a host of other heroes and crusaders who led and marched and insisted on the cause of freedom. It is no different in our time. Here in media democracy is a cause that goes to the roots of self-government, an issue that just about every other issue depends upon if we are really going to overcome. So I hope when you leave here tonight, you'll think about this. Well, some of you will answer the call. You'll talk to your families and friends about it. You'll speak out, write, sing, march, whatever you can do. Tell the FCC what you think, but don't stop there. Tell all those who make public policy what you think. Use every outlet you can. And as for me, I may be leaving the commission soon, but I can guarantee you this. I intend to keep speaking out and working hard on this challenge. It is too important to stop now. It's too important for you not to be involved. We can do this. We can make it happen. And then, as Citizens United, I believe we can realize the dream of media of, by, and for the American people, media democracy. I like the sound of that term, and I hope you will agree. Thank you very, very much.
Well, it's unanimous, Commissioner. Nobody wants you to retire, so it's another term for you. We have two panels tonight. The first panel will talk about the state of Atlanta's media, and then panel two will discuss the future of Atlanta's media. The way it will work is we have, on panel one, we have 5 individuals who will make comments of 5 minutes, and then I will sort of get the ball rolling with a couple of questions, and then we will give you an opportunity to ask questions of our first panel, and then we will move on to our second panel, and that's kind of how this will play out. So let us begin with panel one, and the subject is the state of Atlanta media. Heather Gray is the president of Radio Free Georgia Broadcasting's Foundation, WRFG. Heather, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to thank Commissioner Kopp for his tremendous service. Thank you so much. I represent community-owned radio in Atlanta, the only community radio station in Atlanta, WRFG, Radio Free Georgia. We offer voices from a vast diversity of people and opinions to empower individuals and communities. We stand against sexism, racism, classism, militarism, and anti-immigrant chauvinism. Community radio educates and informs the public in return for public investment. Commercial media, on the other hand, sells products for profit. It's been found in the history of capitalism that privatization and consolidation of wealth leads to inequities, poverty, and pain. And we have witnessed degradation and relaxation of regulations in virtually everything we've established in America that offers some kind of public commons that benefits the people rather than corporations. It is said that unregulated concentration of wealth led to today's economic debacle yet many want the same formula. That's insane. It has to stop. We have this concentration in media as well, of course. Today we have 4 corporate giants controlling vast numbers of radio stations and reaping billions of dollars at the expense of independent news. Where's the clap for that, you all? Media in America represents corporate America, but it does not have to be this way. The public spectrums that commercial interests use to transmit their signals are owned by us, the people. Yet the government has allowed these interests to use the spectrums for free, to then monopolize and make billions of dollars while offering next to no public service. It's payback time. This cannot continue. Democracy demands informed voters. With corporate media, however, we have a population tainted by information delineated by commercial interests, rather than the breadth of views and opinions of an independent public media system. Given that the FCC has failed to regulate media in the public interest, the situation cries for integrity and independence. What does Atlanta need? It needs more nonprofit community media, and the existing nonprofit media needs financial support on an ongoing basis, rather than teetering on the edge by consistently having to go to its listeners for funds, like a bake sale. Alternatives need to be adapted and planned for immediately. Here are 3 recommendations to support and build community media. For one, the government auctions off frequencies, and there are plans to do more of this. This is the ultimate of gross privatization. Yet these frequencies are owned by us, the public. Instead of auctioning them off, they should be given to communities across America for public and nonprofit broadcasters and public television. They are ours after all. Secondly, commercial media should be required to pay for the right of making use of the frequencies owned by us that they use for their own financial benefit. This is a gift from the public that they do not deserve. Substantial license fees from commercial media should be immediately implemented, and the fees should be used to fund public and nonprofit broadcasters and public television in a public media trust fund. Third, there should be a $300 media tax credit for Americans. Taxpayers will check the media entity they want their money to be assigned to, and or have the money going to the public media trust fund that we need to establish, actually. Occupying Wall Street demonstrators protest economic inequities in America today. The occupation of media needs to be included in the mix, and that means occupying the FCC and the airways to demand that public community radio be prioritized as a necessary public commons, and there must be incentives and opportunities offered to make this a reality. Thank you. Finally, I agree with Commissioner Michael Cox when he said there should be a PBSS in America, a public broadcasting system on steroids. I like that. He said that it can't be done on the cheap, and we'll hear laments that there's not a lot of extra cash floating around these days. But other nations have found ways to support such things.
And the clock is ticking down.
We need to start talking and start planning now. Indeed, let's do it.
All right, our next panelist is Hank Klibodoff, former managing editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and journalism professor at Emory University.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming tonight. Commissioners, it's good to be with you. And I'm thrilled to see that we are engaging on an issue of such great importance. Most of my knowledge is backward-looking. I am not a great predictor of the future, so I'm on I'm on the right path. My knowledge comes from 36 years in the newspaper business and from exploration that I did over way too many years, 12 years working on a book about news coverage of the civil rights movement. And that knowledge has brought me certain insights and certain wisdom. And some of it applies to today and maybe to the future, and some of it may not. When I look back at the coverage of the civil rights movement and see what really made it work, it's clear to me that at an important period in time, the civil rights movement got its wings from the news coverage. It is the news coverage that awakened America. And I'm very pleased to say that, in fact, I don't want to kill the ending of the book. I think you know how it turns out. But the ending of the book came from Congressman Lewis. He had understood the impact that news organizations, having all those eyes on Sheriff Clark and Bull Connors and the dogs, had in waking the nation up. And he talked about how in Montgomery on the Freedom Ride that he had felt such enormous elation until he saw the law enforcement come and put cardboard in the windows of the bus so he could no longer see the press, and more importantly, the press could no longer see him. And he knew that was when he was in trouble. He also then gave us the best closing line any book can possibly have. And I was thrilled to be able to use it as the last part of the book, the last passage. He said, the civil rights movement without the news media, and I think he said without reporters or without the press, would have been like a bird without wings or a choir without a song. And I think that what we have today is the same concern, that if we don't have an active, vibrant, full news media and diverse media covering our society, that some terrible, terrible things can happen. I will tell you that as a son of the South who watched demagogue after demagogue after demagogue against all rational thought rise and whip people into a frenzy, knowing that they would fail, I am not confident that we will not suffer that fate again in our country. I believe that we are ripe for someone to take hold of the masses of people, many of them thinking that they're thinking, but maybe not thinking as much as they should be, or not thinking as clearly as they should, and twisting minds in a way that we find ourselves in just doing some terrible things. And I think it's because as much as we like to think that we are going to get through all of this, we're not assured of that. About 3 years ago, I was very disappointed 4 years ago, and obviously the trend in news organizations. I felt that we were losing professionalism. I think we were losing traction, and that important facets of society were not being covered the way they should. I got hopeful after that for a while because I do believe that the new media hold great hope. I think that there is a diversity and a democracy to the new media that gives me great hope. But it's not yet at the level of professionalism that it must be to hold potential demagogues in check. And I worry that our democracy may lose ground before the business model catches up. I don't lose sleep over it, to be honest with you, but I do have my concerns about the future, and I'm hoping that I'll come away from this panel with these distinguished guests today feeling a little bit better about all that. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mo Ivory, the Director of Political and Community Outreach for CBS Radio in Atlanta.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you, commissioners, for this panel, and thank you, Congressman John Lewis, for the invitation to participate. I've been living in Atlanta for a lot of years now. I grew up in New York, and I came to Atlanta in 1987 to attend Spelman College. And it was my first time ever in the South, and I relied on radio and television to learn about how to get around and the things to do in Atlanta and how to just, enjoy myself in Atlanta and also be aware of what was going on. I graduated from Spelman, and I went to law school in Philadelphia. And then I practiced in Philadelphia as an entertainment attorney for many years. My first time working at CBS Radio was actually in Philadelphia when I was the host of a 4-hour talk show on CBS Radio, an AM talk show on CBS Radio. And it was a very exciting experience. I was practicing and on the radio at the same time, and it was the first time that I became engrossed in news, and I lived to talk about the topics of the day and really became very interested in listener feedback and the things people were getting from talk stations and from the media outlets that they were listening to. After that, I switched over to FM and I co-hosted a morning show, and that was a very different experience and learned a lot in that experience as well. I then moved back to Atlanta from Philadelphia and practiced law here for a long time. I then left the law and decided to partake in politics when things started getting very exciting, and I volunteered on the presidential campaign, on a Senate campaign, and then worked on Mayor Reed's campaign. And when that was over, I was going to decide what I wanted to do next, and I had lunch with a friend at CBS Radio who told me that the general manager at CBS Radio in Atlanta was interested in creating a position for a political and community specialist. And I wasn't sure what that was going to be, but I was very interested in having an opportunity to work at 3 stations that I already had been listening to for somewhat of about 20 years. So I went in and I sat with him and we talked for many months about what that position would entail and what it would bring to the station. And I made we talked very much about the substance of it and what kind of partnerships we could bring to the table, both on the political and the community side. And that was about 1.5 years ago. And I've been very thrilled and excited and every day enjoy the job that I get to do, which is to create partnerships in the community and use our radio station to get messaging out that I know is important and that I know our listeners need. And some of those things that I've been able to be a part of have been things that are very important to our younger audiences, to our middle-aged audiences, and to our older demos. We recently, when I first began in June of 2010, there was a violent incident at Screen on the Green in Piedmont Park. I think many people would remember that. We immediately put together a town hall meeting on air, shut the music off, and went live from City Hall to talk about how we could stop the violence and deal with what were the problems that were going on with why teenagers were just roaming around and not having things to do, and that's why these things were being caused. I was really excited that within 3 or 4 weeks of starting that job, I was able to get involved in something like that by pulling together both the political end and the community end to serve our listeners. So we've done a lot of things like that, including partnerships with the National Urban League, National Urban League, EPA, numerous foundations in the city, Turner Foundation, Brady Foundation, City of Atlanta, UNCF. We've just worked with numerous organizations, and I feel that is really the purpose of the work that I wanted to do coming to the station, and I've been very fortunate to be able to work at top stations and to be able to bring that information to the people. So I'm glad to be a part of this panel today. I'm very excited about this conversation and glad that CBS Radio is represented here.
All right, thank you, Mo. Our next speaker is John Weatherford. He is the COO of Public Broadcasting Atlanta, and a long career in Atlanta broadcasting as well.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Public broadcasting is different. Quite a number of people don't know about public broadcasting at all, and many others in this country don't understand it. It's a locally owned and operated news and information service in today's media environment. It's a local voice, supported by local citizens, businesses, and organizations. It's a system quite honestly unique in this country, and it's also significantly different than other organizations in other countries, like the CBC in Canada or the BBC in England. Imagine for a moment people voluntarily paying for and supporting a media endeavor that they could receive for free. In the case of Public Broadcasting Atlanta, we're a joint licensee, which means we're a radio station, WABE, and a television station, PBA 30. But there's much more to Public Broadcasting Atlanta than just a radio station and a television station. There's APS Cable Channel 22, there's our homework hotline, and web services that include Atlanta Planet, supporting 450 local arts and cultural organizations, and Public Square Atlanta, a virtual meeting place for people all around Atlanta to learn more about others in our community and to share thoughts and concerns. There's also mobile video and smartphone apps. Our commitment to and in Atlanta is centered on the diversity of the community we serve, providing programming not available elsewhere, and news of the non-flashing light variety, trying to cover tough issues that matter to us all, and providing a place for Atlantans to hear, see, and learn about their arts and cultural environment. But we see ourselves as part of what is hopefully always going to be a strong complement of local news organizations, commercial radio and television, vital daily, weekly newspapers, local websites and blogs, and technologies just arriving on the scene and those, quite frankly, which have yet to be imagined. What we're seeing today likely wasn't even imagined less than 100 years ago when broadcasting began in this country. What's important, though, is that as many strong and vibrant media outlets thrive in the next 100 years to come. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Joe Torres. He is an author, News for All the People, the epic story of race and the American media.
Thanks. Atlanta has played a critical role in the historic fight for a just and integrated media system. Our nation's first African-American broadcast station was founded right here in Atlanta. One of the first major license challenges by African-American leaders against local broadcasters happened right here in Atlanta. Despite such pioneering efforts, people of color still remain too absent in the media. In Atlanta, there's not a single full-power commercial TV station owned by an African American. But Atlanta is not alone. African Americans own just 8 full-power TV stations nationwide. That is it. Less than 1% of all stations. And overall, people of color own just 3% of all full power stations, TV stations, and just 8% of all radio outlets. But despite this inequality, people of color have embraced broadcasting from the very get-go. Before big corporations understood the commercial potential of radio, following its creation, there was great hope that this new and wondrous technology would provide a voice to the many. African Americans formed amateur radio clubs across the country to teach each other how to broadcast, like the Woodland Radio Association in Chicago in 1915, the Banneker Radio Club in Baltimore in 1922. You see, people of color were not late to the game. Despite all the social, political, and economic obstacles they faced, they were not late to the game. But when Congress created the Federal Radio Commission in 1927 and gave the commission the power to allocate exclusive radio licensing for the first time, had a single person of color ended up with a station. Instead, corporate pressure resulted in the commission awarding our nation's most powerful stations to NBC and CBS. In other words, the government turned over control of the public airways to the rich and powerful, giving them a megaphone while silencing the voices of many. And we have learned through history the harm caused to our communities when we are unable to speak for ourselves. It will be another 20 years before the first African American was able to secure a broadcast license. In 1949, right here in Atlanta, Jesse Blanton put down $50,000 of his own money, his own fortune, to purchase a radio station that was losing money. He quickly turned WERD into one of the top stations in the market with programming that appealed to the black community. Atlanta was also home to one of the first efforts to pressure broadcasters to serve the public interest. In 1970, local black leaders challenged 28 broadcast licenses for their failure to serve the community, forcing broadcasters to improve its coverage and hiring. And from 1971 to 1973, there were more than 340 licensed challenges in this country, around the country, led mostly by black and Latino leaders. This new movement led to the first wave of journalists of color entering our nation's newsrooms, and the first government policies to increase female and minority ownership, and that was in 1978. But over the past 2 decades, government policy have promoted greater media consolidation, making it more difficult for people of color to own broadcast stations, and for policies to encourage greater diversity in ownership of rules have largely disappeared now. The Commission has not come up with effective new policies to replace them, even though the courts have took the agency to task in 2004 and again this year for failing to address this issue. And it may get worse. According to press reports, the FCC is preparing to allow further consolidation, adopting largely the same rules the Bush FCC passed in 2007 that was rejected by congressional Democrats, including President Obama, who was the senator at the time. This is why a coalition of civil rights groups, journalists of color, and media justice groups have called on the Commission to address the racial and gender inequality in our media system. Commissioner Cox, you have had a historic tenure at the FCC. There's really one for the record, folks. The fact this man has gone all across the country during his tenure to hear the voice of the people is something you don't see. We're asking you to suit up one last time for us. One last time, we need you to fight what we think is coming out pretty soon, allowing more newspapers to own broadcast stations in cities across the country. And Commissioner Clyburn, media justice groups and groups across the country, we adore you. We adore you. We've had a good relationship with you. And the fact that you're there it's a great testimony. The first African American FCC commissioner ever in our history. It's an amazing time. We like to think that the struggle has been about having someone like you at that table at this time when those decisions are being made to make sure that the voices of the who are silenced are heard. So we were counting on you to be there. We need policies, and just in closing, we need policies to be able to tell our own stories. This is what it's all about. When other people tell our stories, they often get it wrong. This is why I like to say no to more media consolidation because of the harm it caused to us. And and thank you for having us here and having this conversation. So I look forward to the questions.
All right, Joe, thank you. I'll throw out a couple of the questions here, and then if you want to start lining up over there, there's a microphone set up right underneath the fire alarm. There's a certain irony in that, I suppose. But if you would...
People who signed up, we'll call the names 5 at a time.
Okay. Did everybody hear that? So if you've signed up, we'll call the names 5 at a time. Let's throw this question out while folks are starting to kind of get lined up here and figure out who is going to be called. If you were in charge of the airwaves today, how could Atlanta media be improved? That's a somewhat of an abstract question, but you can make it as specific as you like.
Well, I think I was talking a bit about that before. I would definitely have more community radio, community-owned radio. And one of the issues is that we need to figure out ways to fund this. And what we were saying, or what I was just saying, is that it could be funded by some of the commercially owned stations to pay for the licenses finally. But we need more voices of the people. WRG has this. We are the only community radio station in Atlanta, and now there is one other community radio station that's about to be created in the state of Georgia, and that'll be in Albany, Georgia, by Charles Sherrard, who was one of the leaders of the civil rights movement in Albany. But so that's what I would do. I would make sure that we have more voices in, and I think that Commissioner Clyburn was also, or perhaps Commissioner Cobbs was talking about hearing more directly from the community. When WRG first started, we were going out to the school boards. We had this live on the air at WRG. All kinds of great things like that, and we're just not getting enough of that.
Anybody else like to weigh on this before we go to our friends along the wall there? All right, here we go. You ready? If you would say your name and where you're from, and ask your question, if you would, as opposed to delivering a speech.
First 5 would be Bruce Dixon, Al Bartel, Jocelyn Dorsey, Opal Gavin, and Johnny White, and John Sinton.
And each individual will have 2 minutes, and again, I am the timekeeper not so extraordinaire, so I have a clear vision here, and I will interrupt as your seconds tick down.
All right, I'm Bruce Dixon from blackagendareport.com, the Georgia Green Party, and maybe even from Occupy Atlanta. You never know. The transition from analog to digital TV freed up thousands of potential new channels and frequencies ideal for public municipal broadband and community-owned stations. Instead of handing these publicly owned frequencies back to communities and creating thousands of new not-for-profit community broadcasters, women and minorities, there goes your real diversity. The FCC is privatizing these precious and irreplaceable public properties by auctioning them off. So the number one thing a lot of us think should happen is the FCC ought to stop the frequency auctions and cease these privatizations. I want you to tell me why that can't be done. Number two, the FCC ought to give these frequencies back to the public, back to not-for-profit community broadcasters who will be glad to provide the access to local voices, the local news coverage, and the public service that community broadcasters have that commercial broadcasters have refused to provide us, like rappers who you never hear because they'll never get a Sony contract. Number three is, like Ms. Heather Gray said, make the commercial broadcasters and cable operators pay for the cost of community broadcasting. They're making trillions of dollars off scarce public resources. That is the spectrum. They need to pay for that. At this point, mic check, mic check. Mic check! Here it is. Stop the privatizations. Stop the privatizations. The frequencies belong to the people. The frequencies belong to the people. Create new and diverse community broadcasters. By giving the people back their spectrum. Make the commercial broadcasters and cable operators pay for the scarce public resources they use. And the
scarce resource of time is now upon us. We're over the clock.
Thank you.
All right. So is there a question there, or is that a statement, I guess? Okay. Next, if you would say your name and where you're from.
My name is Al Bartell. I'm a resident of West End, Atlanta. I'm also the chairperson of the Equity and Governance Initiative, a proud stakeholder of the Occupy Atlanta movement and the Save People TV committee. In listening to the comments, I am forced to draw a conclusion that there is a reliable, sustainable, private engagement strategy for the media. It seems to be spearheaded by lobbyists, special interest groups, and corporations. So my question is as follows. Am I to leave this meeting saying that a movement called a public engagement strategy must be declared, organized, and initiated by the people who live in Atlanta? There does not seem to be a public engagement strategy that's been communicated. Am I to leave this meeting saying that the Federal Communication Commission is interested in certifying that Atlanta-based movement that started a minute ago when I started talking? If that is the case, that there is no public engagement strategy, and we, the citizens, have to start that movement, there can be no better clarion call than for that communication to come from the Federal Communications Commission.
Thank you. Right on time. Next, your name and where you're from, and you'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Orael Jivan. I'm a producer at People TV. I've been producing television shows for 25 years. 10 years in Los Angeles, 15 years in Atlanta, and People TV is my home. I'm here to answer a couple of questions I heard on the panel today, especially the one that stated the professionalism keeping up with the technology. And I'm here to say that there are producers that have been producing for years in the community, for the community, by themselves. And it is time for individuals with the clout and the power to back those that have been out on the streets. Because when that happens, you already have your soldiers. You already have the individuals with the cameras, with the equipment, with the technology, with the learned ability to ask and create entertaining journalism. What is needed is the support of those that have the resources to help see that those that are on the grassroots go to the next level. And how many times, may I ask, have the public broadcasting system here in Atlanta come 2 blocks down the street to offer an opportunity for the local producers that have been there 10 years or more for an opportunity to produce television shows on their airways? Until that happens, we can blame any and everybody all the time. And, personally, I don't blame nobody for nothing. Because what I do it on my own. And I'm very, very happy with it. The opportunity to speak here tonight is my opportunity to say, we are ready. The question is, where are you?
All right, let me stop you there for a minute. Let's get the panel engaged here so we are not like potted plants, I think is probably a good way. John, go ahead. John Weatherford.
Specifically, to be clear, and when I said people don't understand public broadcasting, here's a classic case. We are the guys down on Cheshire Ridge Road. We're not 2 blocks up the road from People TV. We do have a program which we air as often as we can fill it up with local videos produced by local producers. It's called Atlanta Shorts, and anybody who wants to submit anything that they have produced to our station is not only welcome to do so, you're encouraged to do so. And this is a place that we think is appropriate for showing what local talent, both filmmakers and animation specialists are able to do.
Can I add one more to that? Public broadcasting is incredibly important. Public media is incredibly important. Regardless of People TV, you have to save People TV. There's Atlanta, the PBS station in Atlanta. But we also have to fight to increase the pie of money going to public television. And in Atlanta right here since 2008, I work for a public interest group called Free Press, National Media Reform Organization. We put out a report that in Atlanta since 2008, 25% of the funding for public media has been cut. There is a real attack on public media and trying to defund public media, and we have to protect it from being the funding level going down. We have to expand it. We have to expand it to give it to more folks and more PEG channels and folks who are doing public media. So we have to fight for that.
Good afternoon. My name is Johnny White. I'm a producer with People TV here in Atlanta, public access channel. Our channel is currently going through a funding crisis, and in the process of scrambling to find funds, which were previously being funded by the city and by the county of Fulton. We don't have a home. This is a public cry for the FCC to at least address the fundamental or the basic or the grassroots, if you will, of community television. I would like to know, is there a plan or is there any consideration for funding public access television, which was formerly funded by the cable companies and which is no more? My second point in question is that this new information age, which we all marvel in, is, for the most part, inaccessible by a lot of Atlantans. Our seniors have, their TVs are dark. I never would have thought in my lifetime I would ask somebody if they've seen a certain program, and they would tell me, well, I can't afford TV. In this day, not just seniors, but students. Students, and TV is very important in the event of an emergency. If there's a hurricane or any national calamity, the people that are most vulnerable won't know. They won't know where to go. TV, for the most part, has been the most informative media by which normal citizens or poor citizens have been able to access. That's gone for a lot of folks. They have no voice here. Can anyone on the panel address those two things for me?
Heather, you wanted to address?
Well, I want to say, I don't know about the two things, but I just want to say to everyone here in Atlanta and to our two commissioners, People TV in Atlanta is just a wonderful, incredibly important resource in so many ways. And the cable stations, the cable entities, whatever, they should pay. It's crazy that they're not paying. As we said earlier, they're using spectrums, they're using what belongs to us, the people. And so how are they benefiting us? They were supposed to be benefiting us by paying for the likes of People TV. I mean, it's outrageous that we're not getting this now. But I do want to say, though, as far as People TV is concerned, not only the broadcasts that they have, but just the opportunities that People TV, in its long and important history, in filming and in interviewing all kinds of groups and individuals and opinions here in the city of Atlanta, and important training also in video and other aspects. It's been so important. I honor People TV. Thank you so much.
Hank, would you like to? I'm sorry, John. Go ahead. Yes.
Very quickly, the question about emergency notification is crucial, and it is something that over the last several years, we at Public Broadcasting Atlanta, and I also serve on the board of the Georgia Radio Reading Service, who tries to reach out to people who are kind of handicapped, be able to let them know what's going on. But we have in 2008 conducted a series of 4 field tests, and then Mike well knows we've had a national EAS test very recently, in which we brought in folks who do not have the normal ways of communicating that most of us here in this room do, to try to see what we can do to make the emergency notification a stronger system so that we don't have any Katrina-like circumstances again.
Hank, could you talk a little bit about how the newspaper business has changed here in Atlanta over the last decade, how every definition in your occupation has been pretty much thrown out the window, aside from getting it right and getting it fast. But it is a new era, a new time, and it has been a difficult period for people in the newspaper business.
Well, there certainly are a lot fewer newspapers. Let me not say a lot fewer newspapers, but there are fewer newspapers than there used to be, of course. There has been this transition to the web. What is really important to know when you worry that your newspaper will go away completely is that still 80 to 90% of any news organization's revenue, a news organization that has a newspaper and a website, still comes from the print edition. And I don't know of any editor, unless they're suicidal, who is going to eliminate their 80 to 90% of the revenue and on the gamble that they can support it all just on the web. No one's quite figured out yet how, Macy's, which pays several tens of thousands of dollars for a full-page ad, is going to pay that much for this ad on the web. At the same time, a lot of websites have, at least my information that may not be current, there are people here who can enlighten me on this, but a lot of news websites are sold out as far as how much advertising they can take, because the public will only take so much advertising on a single page. At the same time, what has happened is a lot of very strong, wonderful journalists have turned around and converted their lives into web-based operations. And I've been thrilled to see a lot of my old colleagues from the AJC producing Art Critic Atlanta, Kathy Fox and Pierre Roux, Wendell Brock. They started this, Arts Critic website, and it's got advertising on it. They had a $20,000 challenge grant recently. Jim Walls, AtlantaUnfiltered.com, doing investigative reporting. LikeTheDew.com, which is just wonderful essays on the South and the culture of the South. Maria Saporta, who does business journalism on the web. So that produced some of this. Where it's going to go, I don't know. I hope they get the support they want.
Mo, would you talk a little bit about CBS Radio here in Atlanta? And there's been a great challenge in radio trying to remain relevant. Sirius XM certainly would seem to be growing, and I'm a new subscriber to that. It has sort of changed my view of how I view terrestrial radio. Give me your sense of that as you're out in the community, particularly V103 is such an important outlet for the African American community here. What do you hear from people and their expectations of your radio station?
We talk often about the effect of satellite radio on terrestrial radio, and we have found that it has had very little impact for us. Our listeners rely on us for the information they need as they travel in their cars back and forth to work and all day long. And not just from V103, but also our other stations, WAOK, which is our talk, exclusive talk station, and Dave FM, which is our rock station. So I think there is a perception out there that satellite has sort of taken over, but it's really just not the case. And what we have done to continue to be relevant for our listeners is just to listen to their feedback, to constantly take the messages that they send to us, which is on a daily basis. They call in, they write, they send us messages online on the website to tell us what they need and what they want to hear, and we react to that, and we program that way. And so if an example, like we had all the candidates in for the school board elections that took place a couple of weeks ago, and that's very important because a large portion of our listening audience are parents or guardians with children in the Atlanta public school system. So we listen to all of the feedback that we get. We do perceptual call-out feedback, and we do all kinds of research to find out exactly what our listeners need, and then we serve that way.
Our next question, if you would introduce yourself and where you're from, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm John Sinton from ProgressiveVoices.com. We're a progressive media aggregator and portal on the internet and on your smartphone. It's called Progressive Voices. I recognize a lot of people here from the days when I was founding Air America Radio, and I know now that we're preaching to the choir. I'm disappointed but not surprised that there's no one here from Cumulus, there's no one here from Clear Channel that I can tell. These are the consolidators, the people who have bought up all the radio stations. I don't speak much to television. I'm a radio person. I'm a former radio licensee. And I do want to take just a second to say to you, Dr. Cox, thank you. 10 years of steadfast service. You've been on the right side of every single issue for the people of the United States, not the corporations in the United States. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And now, and Commissioner Clyburn, we have high hopes for you.
Thank you.
And let me ask you, too, if I may. In your minds, and I know how you would vote, but the commission, of course, is made up of 3 commissioners who are in the prevailing political party. The White House makes the appointments, and 2 commissioners who are in the minority. Is there any way that if citizens wanted to challenge licenses that are held currently by Clear Channel and Cumulus on the basis that they serve no local public interest, that their programming is automated and originates at great distances, does anybody have a chance at getting challenged through your august board?
Well, it's 2 different questions that you ask. Is there a way to petition for change and challenge a license? And the answer to that is yes. It's become more and more difficult over the years to do that. It's become more and more expensive to do that in a formal way. You can always lodge an informal complaint with the commission, but that's a little different. As to the second question, I can't be terribly optimistic. We've had a lot of petitions to deny. There has been some, in some cases, pretty strong evidence of non-performance or malperformance or whatever you want to call it. I don't think the Commission has a very compelling record on really processing those petitions, and I've been pushing to have serious attention given to some of those. You know, it's not like the Commission has to become this onerous and awfully burdensome, constantly interfering regulator, but I think if we would take one or two of those petitions where there really is some strong evidence and put that licensee on probation, maybe give them a little chance to clean up his or her act, and if they're not, give it to somebody who will serve the public interest. I think you'd have to do that about once or twice, and the word would go forth again that there was a cop back in the beat, and we'd get back closer to what that original bargain was between the broadcaster and the American people through their government, free use of the public airwaves to serve the public interest. But you know, the situation has evolved. It's become such a bottom line business now. You can go back, though, to when we were a little closer to that original bargain. You go back to somebody like Bill Paley, who was a titan in the industry, but very supportive of his news operation. That's one of the reasons you had that great Edward R. Murrow generation. He got all his news people together one day, and he says, I want you to go out and get the news, do what you need to do. I've got Jack Benny for entertainment. I got Jack Benny to pay the bills. You let me worry about that. You do the news. Now, I don't know how often you hear that now in the big mega corporations, but it would be nice to hear that coming out of some of the corporate boardrooms.
Commissioner, I'm going to try and keep this rolling. Could we have a quick primer? I think maybe a lot of people don't really understand consolidation and what exactly it means. It happened in the mid-'90s during the Clinton era, and what was the thought behind a few corporations owning all of the radio stations in the United States?
Well, consolidation, in my mind, just refers to the tendency we have seen of a few huge corporations to buy up more and more formerly independent, family-run, local broadcasting outlets. And we have had an awful lot of that, and it goes back a long time, but I think it really kind of picked up speed in the 70s and the 80s. And as I tried to explain in my remarks, I think there was a private sector reason for it, which was the mentality that has done so much harm to our entire economy, I think, of the speculation and consolidation through many sectors. It's just telecommunications and media kind of got there first, and we should have learned a lesson. But there's always that thought coming out of the boardroom, I think, of there are all these wonderful efficiencies and economies to be gained by consolidation. They're not often found. A lot of these mergers don't end so well. But you also have to realize that when you finance a big transaction like that, that's very expensive, and you've got to make some cuts somewhere in order to do that. And that's the reason, like I was saying, why I think they look first, or too often they look first at that newsroom, and can we cut the overhead? Can we get by with fewer reporters? Can we do a deal with another station, even though that means one less vocal voice? And I think that's been by and large harmful to.
Well, let's do this. Let's take one more question from the crowd, and then we'll have some final thoughts from panel number one here, and then we will move in panel number two, and we will address some other issues. So I'm a little bit like a MARTA driver here. I'm going to try and keep the bus on time here, and the lights go off, I'm told, at 8:30, so we've got to hit the accelerator a little bit and get rolling here. So if you would introduce yourself, where you're from, and you will be on the clock for 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Hans Klein. I'm on the faculty of the School of Public Policy at Georgia Tech. I have a question for Commissioners Clyburn and Copps. How can local citizens most effectively make their voice heard at the federal level with federal regulators? If we're seeing in some ways a repeat of what happened in 2007, possible rules in the pipeline, and at that time we did see the American people manage to make their voice heard in Washington, D.C. Are there any lessons from that period that apply to the period now?
Yes, I think, and this is what I was trying to say, I think that's the way real reform evolves and develops. It's from concerned citizens at the grassroots level. finding like-minded people. You've got to organize. You've got to figure out the strength of additionality. Politics is a game of addition. Public policy is a game of addition and having people. But I think real systemic change comes from the bottom up. I think on a lot of these issues, there's not necessarily opposition in some parts of the government to them, but there's not the feeling that a whole lot of people are pushing them, or somebody's going to say thank you when it's done, or somebody's going to say job well done, or something like that. That may sound a little bit crass, I suppose, but it's kind of the way the thing seems to work. But as I said before, I'm a believer in grassroots organization. I think there are lots of people in this community, some of them up here, who have worked long and hard to try to bring voices together and to send a message, and you just got to kind of keep doing that. And as John Lewis said, let's go for it. Let's get organized. Let's make change in this country in the future like we made it in the past. And there's no easy way. There's no substitute. It's not just electing somebody and think, whoopee, everything's going to be better tomorrow morning, because that's not the way the system works.
And to, am I on? And to further continue on that, I listened a lot because we talked a lot about auctions. We talked about a lot of the symptoms, the issues, the challenges before us. But the solution is complex and it's multiplex. What I mean by that, when you talk about auctions and our issues and challenges as it relates to this, let us remember what the potential of an auction means to the federal treasury. And so, I'm not taking a side. I'm just throwing out some realities. When you talk about the prospect of an auction, that means money coming into a strapped treasury. So all of these conversations are on a plate. But what I want to also affirm when we talked about and when we bring forth the issues and the things that are important to us in terms of diversity, which is something you're going to hear my office talk more and more and more about, and how we can effectuate and put in line solutions. Everything needs to be on the table. If we have an auction, I know some of if we move in that direction, what does that mean in terms of the entire pie? There have been proposals out for a number of years to use parts of these proceeds to fund organizations, to mandate that 6 or 8%. There have been conversations happening like that for years. There needs to be more targeted conversations happening now. So we need to look at that from a not just the FCC. Tonight we're an easy subject of engagement because we're sitting up here. But when you talk about People TV, one of the best visits I've ever had in my life, and we're in the studios up the street. I don't know Atlanta from anywhere else, but I knew when I was approaching People TV. I knew exactly what they were. I knew exactly what they were doing. And I am, if you ask anybody, one of the first things that I had totally embraced was a People TV concept, and I have been an advocate ever since. But if we want to, I'm on the record, but if we want to keep these options and these opportunities growing, we need to know that it has to happen from the entire ecosystem. We have to encourage more diversity in the boardrooms. We have to encourage more diversity at our traditional, whatever that means, television and radio stations. We have to encourage diversity and all of this forward thinking all in the entire ecosystem. We have to do that, and we have to be proponents of these ideas and concepts if there is an auction, to set up frameworks so everybody in this system, in this ecosystem, benefits. We need to talk to Congress. We need to talk to our state lawmakers with the franchising, with the rules that have changed to help that perpetuated people's position. We need to speak to lawmakers and influencers at every level if we want to effectuate change. So just coming here with the FCC and thinking this is a single source, the single place of making the long-standing change, that's not the case. It's going to be difficult, but you've got people like me, and you've got Commissioner Copps, who is just retiring on paper, I don't know, I cannot function without Commissioner Cobb, so he's just retiring on paper. Who will continue to be partners in this. But we need to have a multifaceted, very intelligent approach if we want to effectuate long-term change.
All right, we are going to have time at the end of the next panel for more questions and for more folks to get involved. But as we wrap up panel one here, let's sort of bounce around quickly and get some thoughts, observations, and musings about what all of you think as you've heard some of the folks ask their questions, make their statements, and some of the conversation that you've heard. So as you exit tonight, what is sort of running through your brain? So Heather, if you would start.
I just want to say just quickly, talking about the auction, Commissioner Clyburn, is that, as I said earlier, and we're all talking about the need for diversity in media, why do we auction off frequencies that are owned by us? It should be given to the people for an increase in public media and community-owned media. So I wish that you would consider that as well in your deliberations at the FCC. But I want to also take this opportunity to thank Commissioner Copps for his long and incredible service at the FCC. You all, this is the very last official FCC hearing that he's participating in. It's so rare that we have a public servant who is actually concerned about the public interest, and he's been it. So I want to thank you so much, Commissioner Copps. I mean, really.
Thank you.
And yes.
Thank you.
And one final thing. One of the things that Commissioner Copps was saying when he was speaking is that if there's going to be change made in almost anything we do in America, it needs to come from the grassroots community, you all. If you've heard some concerns tonight and you're going to hear some more in the next panel, we need to organize in the city of Atlanta if we want to make these changes and join forces with other groups around the country. So please think about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
The single most important instance of licensee losing its license for failure to serve the public happened in Mississippi. I was living back there. It's WLBT television. The licensee was abusing the public. They allowed their lobby to be used by the White Citizens Council to handle out racist literature. They cut off Thurgood Marshall whenever he was on the air. But more than that, they just ran a really bad organization that didn't serve the public need. It was owned by an insurance company. And through great courage and total conscientious, assiduous work by a citizens brigade who watched television every minute of every hour of every day that it was on and took notes, the FCC ultimately stripped WLBT, the owners of the license, and handed it over to a not-for-profit, multiracial, multi-gender organization who completely converted that into one of the most important news and programming stations in America. Citizens did that. They were concentrated day in and day out, and it worked. I hope that history is not over. What I've heard tonight educates me some about the difficulty in challenging, whether it's the city over cable licenses, and I covered cable back in the day and when community access was the rage, and I don't know how often those are reviewed, but it seems like that clearly they ought to be reviewed more frequently. And if we are going to regulate television, and if we are going to have an FCC, then the licensing that goes through them has to be real, and it has to matter, and challenges have to have an opportunity to get traction. Otherwise,
all right, Mo?
I'm just encouraged by the participation tonight in this conversation, and I can say that at V103 and certainly at WAOK, we're committed to constantly listening to our listeners and what they need and serving those needs. And we are engaged in so many community opportunities on air, on site, online. And I just encourage everybody to always participate or contact anybody that you think you need to let us know about what you want to hear or what we can be doing better. We're totally open to that, and I'm just glad to be a part of this conversation and to be affiliated with the #1 station. And I feel that B103, the People Station, we do try exactly to do that, to be the People Station. And, I'm glad that we're here to participate.
Thank you, Mo. John?
Radio and television do a lot of different things, but to me, the two most important things that we're engaged in are news and information. In Atlanta, specifically, there are several community stations. There's WCLK, there's WRFG, there's WRIS, there's WREK, and there's us. I urge you to support all of them. Each one of them provides a valuable service, a valuable perspective on this community, and they're all important. All the media, as I said before, I think is very important in this country. It's key to the future of this democracy. And I can tell you that even some of the guys on the commercial side will sit down and listen to you. And it is worth your time to sit and talk and make your voice heard. I recently had a great conversation with, to me, the relatively new editor of the AJC. People will sit down and listen if you have genuine concerns. They really are people on the other side who want to know what you think, and who are willing to take that information and do something with it.
Joe?
Often when I speak, one of my favorite quotes, I say it all the time, is when the first African-American newspaper was founded in our country in 1827, Freedom's Journal in New York City. And when the paper was published for the first time, the publisher said the reason why he founded the paper, he said, "We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. From the press and the pulpit, we have suffered much from being incorrectly represented." That is still true to this day. That is still true to this day. It's a shame. I said Commissioner Clyburn is the first African-American woman FCC. Folks are clapping as they should. It's a shame. It's a shame. It's 2000 and whatever, and she's the first African-American woman. It should have happened a long time ago. So the thing is, this is about self-determination. It's about, do we get to determine our own stories and tell our own, and inform our own communities? This is what this is about. And there's great harm when we can't do that. I'm Puerto Rican, grew up in New York City. I traveled the country, and you can't tell me all this anti-immigrant stuff going on television and radio, all the hate speech is not harming our community. It is not a joke. And the job of Congress and the FCC, in my opinion, is not to protect the profits of big corporations. It is to serve a public good. I take this seriously. So I just say that my organization, we don't take any corporate money, and we advocate on behalf of the public. And I wake up every day and I go to the Capitol Hill, whatever, the FCC, Congress, and often I feel beat over the head because the stack that is against us. The other side has an army of lobbyists. We cannot do this without your participation. It won't work. It's not going to change. As Commissioner Kopp said, as the other panel said, we need your involvement, we need your help. So continue to fight.
All right, panelists, thank you very much for your time, your thoughts, your expertise, your intellect, all of your opinions. We greatly appreciate it. And we will now make way for panel number 2. So if you want to stretch, I know everybody's been sitting for a long time, and this might be a nice opportunity to kind of move around a little bit.
Thank you very much. That was great.
The future of Atlanta's media, and we will begin the same way that we did with panel number 1. Each of our panelists will have 5 minutes for a statement and to sort of give their thoughts and views of our topic tonight of the future of Atlanta's media. And then I will toss out a couple of questions, and then we will take your questions again along the wall over there near the fire alarm. So, and everybody's all signed up. Everybody's set to go? Yes, we are all set. So here we go. Let's start with Eric Celeste, who is new to Atlanta, out of Dallas, Texas, the editor-in-chief of the alternative weekly Creative Loafing, which has been a very influential newspaper in this community for a lot of years.
40 years, as a matter of fact. This year came just in time for the party, which is usually when I show up. I'll give you a quick background. Because I'm terrible at deadlines, I forgot to send in my bio, and through a snafu that's largely my fault. That's the information on a very nice librarian named Eric Celeste out of Minnesota that's in your pamphlet. So I've spent the last 23 years in Dallas, Texas, doing a lot of what I came here to do, which is starting and working in either alternative media or trying to help mainstream media try to rethink and change and reach new and younger audiences. That's sort of what I've been doing most of my career. I started a weekly newspaper in 1994 that went against the Village Voice-owned weekly newspaper there. I worked at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and went into the arts department and tried to, and the features department, and tried to help them reach new audiences, just as in the late 90s, just as the internet was starting to become into newsrooms. Went back to alternative weeklies at the Dallas Observer and covered the media in Dallas and wrote columns about what I saw happening in newsrooms around the city and where I thought they were lacking and where I thought we were lacking. And then went on to the City magazine there and actually spent the last couple of years trying to get some experience on the other side of the table, working with both politicians in terms of helping them communicate to their audience. I helped run the communications director for District Attorney Craig Watkins' most recent re-election campaign. You may have heard of him and his work with the Innocence Project. And now I've come to Atlanta. So quickly about what I'm looking forward to here, and because I'm coming at a time of great transition for the market and also for creative loafing. I was somebody who started out, I've always been a media nerd, and I would cut out, growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I would cut out clippings of Mike Royko and William Raspberry articles, and I would put them in a little binder. And I would, before I go to bed, that's what I would reread to myself. So I didn't have a lot of friends or girlfriends, but I had an intense passion about the media and about its role. And so, what happened was, then when I went into media, when I went first to the morning news out of school and into some magazines, what I noticed was even though a lot of talented people and a lot of great institutions, it never seemed to reflect the world that I knew and lived in. It seemed to talk about a world of experts and talking heads and people that existed not in the bars and the restaurants and places and the things that me and my friends talked about. And I was a white male, so if it didn't cover my world, I can't imagine if I was female or African American or Hispanic, how little it reflected their world. So I tried to do what I could on a small level to change that. We started a weekly newspaper that tried to talk to young people and was very successful. Was around for 10 years, funded it ourselves. Got to be about a 50-person staff and was the only city in the country that had 2 such weeklies. Then was hired away by larger organizations to try to do that to their newsroom culture as well. And so I have a different take on, and it may be really unpopular, having worked also with a lot of these large media organizations. I don't see some of these conglomerates and corporations as evil per se. They're a lot of times staffed with really smart, hard-working people. I just see them, by their nature, as incredibly inefficient and dysfunctional, and they don't do often a really great job of what it is they're trying to do. And that's been great for me because it allows things like alternative weeklies to step into the breach and pick up and cover things that they think aren't being covered in the right way. And that's what we're doing now. And more so now, I'm extremely excited about where we're at as we move to a digital age, because as we are managing our slow decline in readership and revenue in print, it is slow enough that we can try to take our resources, move them online, find new audiences, find new ways to engage them, tell stories that we've been telling, and try to reach and try to lead discussions online, which is totally different from what we used to do. When you put out a print product and it sits there, your mission was sort of to tell great stories and let it sit there and hope that people reacted to it. And if you got some letters, and that was great. But now, because of the feedback loop, because you can get on and comment, because you can go and set up, I mean, I just let somebody go the other day who had been working for the paper for a long time as a freelancer, reduced his role, and he went on his blog and complained about it and set up a conversation about how we were stupid to do that. That's okay. That's great. So I'm excited about moving forward what we can do and what we're trying to do with Creative Loafing in terms of leading discussions online, discussions that lead to a higher quality of life in Atlanta.
You're going to get me thrown out of here, Eric. I've got to jump in. Thank you. Let's move on. This is Sage Crump. Art is change. Black voices for internet freedom.
First, I'd like to say thank you to Commissioners Clyburn and Cops for coming to Atlanta. So few of our representatives are really going to go away and come and find out what we're thinking, and so we really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Artist Change is a network of cultural organizers, artists, activists across the country that use media to reach communities for change. We believe that it's not enough just to change laws and minds, but we need to change the basic values of our country. And to do that, we believe art, creative practice, and culture are the ways in which that can happen. Individually, we have all had a moment where a particular song, a poem, a performance, or something has shifted us, made us think about something differently, touched us deeply. We know art, culture, and creative practice is what is necessary to create the culture shift that is going to have sustainable long-term change in this country. Much like Commissioner Clyburn spoke about, it's not any one thing. It's an ecosystem. So we can address the issues, the social justice issues of this country in a myriad of ways. So how did Artist Change get here if our background is all about art and culture? Well, while there are organizations like David Dorfman Dance that has a whole piece around how we speak to the political structure, where there are organizations or artists such as, in town we have Radcliffe Bailey, Memories is Medicine, who talks about our interdependence. All of this artwork is designed to make us think differently about the world in which we live. These are artists that you'll find on stages internationally in galleries worldwide. But for every David Dorfman and for every Radcliffe Bailey, there are tons of artists such as Jasiri X, a political rapper out of Pittsburgh whose organization One Hood helps young people learn to be media makers and tell their own stories. There's Fabiana Rodriguez, who is a visual artist who goes to communities and teaches them how to do low-cost silk screening and does political poster rallies so that you know how to get your message across succinctly. This is the way in which art is attached to change, which creates communities that aren't being led by anyone else, but are telling their own stories, letting people know what it is that they want and need, and stepping up for change. I've got a ton of notes I'm going to try and get through. So that's how we started getting involved in this whole conversation about net neutrality and internet freedom and media democracy. We love that term. But a funny thing happened. Once we started getting into the conversation, we realized that these are not new conversations. That the idea of net neutrality and internet access, that media, whether it be traditional media or new media, are just civil rights issues. They just have a different forum. So these are long-standing issues that we are continually trying to address, that we cannot let slide by as something brand new, because what happens is much, I like sitting next to Eric because I don't know if we agree very much, but we'll see. Because what happens is we drag these same old challenges of disenfranchised communities of the poor, of ignoring people of color, of what is really overt and covert racism still in this country, we drag these onto the internet. We take them right out of traditional media and we place them online. It is not any different. It is not just about access to the internet so that you can Facebook your friends. It is about access to information. When you have 75% of companies doing 100% of their hiring online, that's about labor. That's about employment. That's not just about I need a computer in my house. And so we really want to take this conversation and make it broader than just access smartphones. We want to take it to the communities that need help, that where there's an immigration conversation, where there's a conversation about labor issues, where there's a conversation about diversity, and it's not just diversity of voices or who's behind the camera, but it's about getting a really clear idea of what this country looks like. What are the real issues seething underneath the top, the fluff that we get to see, as Commissioner Kopp spoke about. And that we begin to deal with those, because if not, then we're going to continue to drag them on and on, regardless of whether it's on paper or whether it's on a screen. So that's how we got to this conversation. There are some things I want us to think about really clearly, that what we're looking at is this digital divide is not, again, I'd like to mix Eric, is not a passive byproduct of technology. I think we want to act like sometimes that things just happen, movements just occur out of nowhere, but we know secretly there are real strategies behind all of this. I like to think of myself as not a conspiracy theorist, but a mystery hunter. And when you begin to really dig, you realize that there are policies and strategies in place that are designed to continue to keep a class, an underclass in this country. And that this conversation that we're having with the FCC, this conversation that we are having together now today, is the beginning of really looking at what is the issue underneath the divide that we're talking about. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Sean McIntosh, and she is the public editor for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Thank you. Commissioners Cox and Clyburn, thank you for hosting this and for your interest in this important topic. I also want to acknowledge Representative Lewis's history of courage and leadership.
Bring it into you just a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Just even closer.
Okay. We at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution are really concerned about the information needs of the community. We believe that well-informed citizens are critical to a functioning democracy. Our newspapers played a leading role in informing this community since 1868, and our proud tradition includes Henry Grady, a leader of the New South movement, and Ralph McGill, who opposed segregation, and Cynthia Tucker, an editorial page editor and courageous columnist. James Cox founded our company in 1898 when he bought a newspaper in Dayton, Ohio, and he turned it from a newspaper that focused on fluff to a newspaper that focused on hard news and uncovering corruption in the communities. Since that time, the company has grown into a large and diverse organization with newspapers and radio stations and television stations in 34 markets. It's still family-owned and it's still locally owned and based here in the Atlanta area. And it still believes in the journalism that serves the community and uncovers wrongdoing. It's no secret that newspapers are facing really challenging times, but don't count out the AJC or think of it as mired in the past or somehow a relic. We're committed to being part of the new landscape and serving the community in this community for decades to come. We're changing our business model to ensure the long-term health of the newspaper. In the past few years, we've had a lot of success by focusing our circulation footprint on the metro Atlanta area and focusing our journalism on the needs of the metro Atlanta readers. We're strongly focused on the future. We were one of the first newspapers to introduce an iPad app. We recently introduced a digital subscription bundle so you can get your news on any format. We have a huge social media audience. We have more than 300,000 Facebook and Twitter followers, and we average 18 million visits a month on HAC.com. That's not to say print is anywhere near extinct. Our print edition is among the fastest growing in the country on Sundays, and we've invested in the print edition this year. We added more national and international news, and we added more community coverage and more places to tell those good news stories that y'all have been asking us for. Technology and the way of delivering the news is, of course, changing and will continue to change, but what's unchanged is the need for professionally reported and edited local content. Our research shows that readers expect us to have watchdog and investigative journalism, to dig deep to get the real story, and to provide information they can't get anywhere else. We understand the Commission's concern with the national decline in accountability and watchdog journalism. At the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, there's been no diminishment in that area. We have more watchdog reporters focused on investigative and accountability journalism than we've had at any time in the newspaper's history. That's led to some stories y'all are probably familiar with. The students of the Atlanta Public Schools were cheated by a scandal where administrators organized cheating. Our newspaper revealed that after 2 years of reporting and sticking with it, despite relentless pressure from the business community to back down on the story. Ultimately, a state investigation implicated top brass and educators at 44 schools for harming the future of children there. In Gwinnett County, we reported on land purchases that were based on inflated appraisals, led to the indictment of one county commissioner and the resignation of another. In Cobb County, we revealed the growth of a for-profit division of Cobb EMC. Prosecutors are now saying that enriched the former CEO at the expense of co-op members. Our reporting on mistreatment and death of mental health patients at state institutions across Georgia has led to the Justice Department overseeing the system and brought about reform. These are the kind of stories that serve citizens. One reader wrote us recently and said the public would not have any way to know about these issues and problems if you didn't bring them to our attention. So our focus on Watchdog, on digital, and on collaboration across platforms is our commitment to the future. And it's working. Readers show that our research shows that satisfaction is up, and readers believe we're improving. We're really optimistic about the future, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this conversation. Thank you.
I'm very impressed. A newspaper woman able to speak to time. That's very impressive. Our next panelist is Deneen Miller, who is the former political reporter and creator of the blog MyBrownBaby.com.
Good evening. I want to say that I'm extremely pleased to be here on this panel and blown away by the conversation. I decided to be a journalist in the 9th grade. There was a newscaster on television named Sue Simmons. I grew up in Long Island, New York. And at the time, she was interviewing New Edition. And I loved Ralph Tresvant. You couldn't tell me that I wasn't going to grow up and marry him and have all of his babies. And so that's why I wanted to be a journalist. And everything that I did from that moment on was to become a journalist so I could be Ralph Tresvant. After I got into learning the business and really understanding what it took to be a journalist in the 9th grade, by the time I got to 12th grade, I applied for a scholarship with a local newspaper called Long Island Newsday. And they had a program called Minorities in Communications. And what they did was they would go sweep all of Long Island and try to find African American and Latino students who are interested in being journalists and convince them to become journalism majors and pay for them to go to school. Their main goal was to diversify the newsrooms. And I was second to the last person to get that scholarship. I was able to matriculate into Newsday. I worked with them during the course of my summers while I was studying at Hofstra University, also in Long Island, and grew to love something more than Ralph Tresvant. That was the written word. And everything that I did from that moment on was not only geared toward honing my craft, because I found out through this that I had an incredible gift for putting words together, but also understanding my role in making sure that every word that I wrote was geared toward showing us in a different light. Because I was tired, like John Lewis said, Congressman Lewis said, of being portrayed as just the criminal in the newspapers and on the televisions. And so everything that I did from that moment on was geared toward making sure that every word that I wrote was, written to show us in a different light. I ended up getting my first job from the Associated Press, which also had a program that was geared toward diversifying the newsrooms. Out of all of the juniors and seniors in the country, they had 15 slots for young journalists, people who wanted to be journalists in their newsrooms, and I got one of those 15 slots. I started working the midnight shift in Newark, New Jersey, and then became a political reporter in upstate New York covering Governor Cuomo, and was recruited by the New York Daily News based on some stories that I did on black folks and corruption and all different kinds of things that were happening to the African American community. I was recruited by the Daily News to come and do the same thing for them. When I went to be a political reporter at the Daily News, I was 25. I was the only African-American woman in the New York City political press corps, and I was only one of 4 black journalists covering politics in all of New York City for the 6th largest newspaper in the country. And everything that I did, again, was geared toward making sure that we showed us in a different light. Fast forward through, I was a political reporter, I did entertainment journalism, I eventually became an editor at a magazine called Honey Magazine, and after that I became an editor at Parenting Magazine. And each one of those way stations, except for Honey, which was a black-owned magazine, I was usually the only black person in the room. That's from the editor at the top down to the person who cleaned the toilets. And that's disgusting. And that was 15 years ago. I'm blown away. I say I'm blown away by this conversation because we're still having the same conversation. I'm 43. And I got into this business when I was 18. We are still having this conversation. The beauty of today is that we don't have to sit around waiting for the newspapers to hire us. We don't have to sit around waiting for the television stations to see us. Right. We don't have to sit around waiting for other people to open the door for us. We have the internet. I founded, I only have 20 seconds, but I founded My Brown Baby specifically so that I could create a space online where we could tell our stories the way they need to be told without interruption and without the someone coming and snatching our words away from us. I encourage you to go and check it out. I was going to read a little something to you, but if you go on to mybrownbaby.com, you look on the About page, you can see the first post that I wrote. I wrote it in the middle of the night in my pajamas on my computer, and it's turned into a space where 30,000 moms and dads, African Americans mostly, 95%, come every day to hear about parenting from the perspective of through the African American lens. And you just won't find that anywhere else. And so that's the beauty of the internet and the beauty of new media. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Milner. Let's move on to Ed Price. He is the Research Director, Interactive Media Technology Center at Georgia Tech.
Good evening. I want to thank the commissioners for having this event. I'll say I've read a lot of FCC rulemakings and filings over the years, and especially during the previous presidential tenure, when there was a new rulemaking came out, maybe I didn't have time to read it all thoroughly. I could go to Commissioner Kopp's statement at the end of the document and get an idea of what they did or what they didn't do in that filing. So that was a really useful, and continues to be a very useful place to go. And now we have his colleagues' esteemed writings as well. I've been a member of the faculty here at Georgia Tech for about over 20 years now. And I'm an engineer by training. While I do a lot of non-engineering things these days. I've seen amazing changes in technology over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, we had no World Wide Web. Now we have near ubiquitous access connectivity to information anywhere at any time. We have streaming video today. We have home broadband access, not just at our offices. And we have wireless networking, at least almost everywhere in this community. These technologies have made possible a virtually limitless amount of content available to users, including many varieties of digital media. We can all be authors, musicians, video producers, and even start on productions nowadays. But as we've enabled this endless amount of media to be created, in many cases we find ourselves consuming media from a limited and increasingly concentrated set of sources. In addition, the duopoly present in many markets for wired broadband access could ultimately threaten the ability of us to access the widest variety of media. While 4G wireless broadband promises and provides more options in this area, by its very nature it is slower than wired broadband, and it's a much more limited and costly resource for end users to use and access. Another area of interest of mine is the accessibility of media, both in a very broad and a very narrow sense. The internet and wireless networking provides new means of access to content, but often overlooked is the issue of whether it's truly accessible to all Americans. A variety of dimensions are included here. People living in rural or urban areas may not have the availability of broadband networks. Persons with low incomes may not be able to afford accessible affordable broadband, although some new initiatives from the Commission and industry are trying to change that in some cities, including Atlanta. But these are, again, limited programs. The FCC's Lifeline program now provides subsidized wireless access for some low-income citizens, whereas before it was limited to wireline telephones only. More critically, however, in my opinion, and in my field of work, is an area that's often ignored: the accessibility of new media and digital technologies to people with disabilities. Georgia Tech is the home of the Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center on Wireless Technology. It's a federally funded center looking at use of wireless technologies for people with disabilities, both in terms of accessibility to the technology and new applications made available by the technology. We also have funding from other sources, including the National Council of Disabilities, Department of Education, and HHS, to explore various ways to access new media for people with disabilities better. And this isn't just watching entertainment. Again, this is jobs, careers, lifelines, emergency services. History of media in the U.S. has been one of waves of new technologies and new forms. And pretty much every time this happens, it presents new barriers for people with disabilities. Think of television. Many TV programs have closed captioning for deaf or hard of hearing individuals. How often do you see closed captioning on YouTube videos? Can I see any hands of people that have seen closed captioning on YouTube? I don't see any out there. There are similar issues for things like touchscreen phones if you're blind or low vision, emergency alerts for people that are disabled, wireless access to 911 for people who have speech or hearing disabilities, and many, many more. Congress and the Commission are hard at work to address these issues. Representatives of the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, the WARN Act, and new rulemakings pending for next generation 911. To close my remarks, digital technologies have fundamentally changed the way we access and consume media, and they've been outlets for a wide variety of media that could not have been imagined a generation ago. Still, the public must be vigilant to ensure that their access to information is enhanced, not hamstrung by technology choices made by corporations. Thank you.
We are live on the internet through the FCC website, and we have gotten a few questions here from Twitter. So before we start to take some of your questions, why don't we bounce off a couple of these? One of the questions from Twitter, this is from rural Georgia, and the question is, TV access is only, and I think Ed, maybe you started to address this. You might be the best to address this. The TV access is only available via satellite or cable to a lot of people in these rural, mountainous areas. How can the FCC help low-income consumers to gain access to television? What needs to be done so that people of limited income have the ability to have television?
Well, I think the Commissioner can answer this as well, but I know, for example, in this state, Georgia Public Broadcasting, not John's channel, the other one, they provide some repeaters in rural mountainous areas that get the signals kind of over the mountains down to the hollows. But the commercial stations don't necessarily do that unless they choose to. So there could be perhaps programs to encourage that more. I'm not sure, I might have a good answer beyond that.
Commissioner Clyburn, this is also from Twitter for you. Exactly what are you going to do to achieve women minority media ownership that represents our percentage of African American women in the population of the U.S.?
That's a good question, and it affirms a good challenge in that we put forth, tonight we've been hearing a lot, no one has said it precisely about the legal challenges that prevent us from doing some things that we did in the 70s when we had some significant movement in this space, and some would say more diversity in this space. That door has not shut, but it's shrunk considerably. So what the FCC, I am hoping, will do is to conduct studies, is to fund studies that will help give us the data that we need in order to be able to meet those standards. There is a strict scrutiny standard that we all know that we must meet if we are to incorporate any type of race-specific remedies for some of the issues that we're speaking about today. And on the gender side, though the bar is an intermediate standard, the challenge for the FCC is we don't have the data basically at all in terms of women's influences and concentration and the data that we need to make proactive decisions. So what you will hear our office speak more about and push more for is the funding and the commissioning and the application of getting these studies in motion, so that if there are proactive things that we all feel we should do, that we will have the standing to be able to stand up and to be able to justify in court to move forward. So that's what the FCC, I trust, with your help, we're going to need the support because again, we are not in isolation here. We are individuals who are confirmed by the Senate, appointed by the President. There's a political influence, and not everyone is on the same page as we are. So it's going to take that type of engagement to affirm how important these issues are by way of diversity and what it means in terms of news value judgment, in terms of coverage as a community, and ultimately in how individuals view themselves and their communities. It's all important. It's all interrelated.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, let's take some questions. And again, if you have the ability here now to see this clock, so you have 2 minutes to make your statement.
Is Martin Clark here, Patricia Creighton, Ron Shakin, and Ron Allen?
So if you would introduce yourself and where you're from, the floor is yours.
I'm Jerry King from Atlanta with Starbreakers. I represent the recording industry and the independent television industry. First, I'd like to say that one independent record would create 33 immediate jobs. I'm challenging the commission that in 2007, there was a mandate in with the payola. There was a mandate for 8,400 hours of free airtime through the 4 major broadcasters. There was also, I think you were doing an investigation to see about putting these independent records on the playlist, and also with the times. I'd like to ask you, when are you going to be able to do something to enforce that mandate with the major broadcasters? And also, would you check to see about why the television public access stations are not getting the funding when they're actually taking out fundings from each bill every month to pay for public access, and then still do not deliver public access. 92 cents is taken out every month from each customer. That's over close to $12 million a year for a station that takes $500,000 to run. Thank you.
All right, your name, where you're from, and you know the drill.
We're gonna ask several people to come up and we'll address them. We'll think we'll move quicker.
My name is Donald King. I live in Jonesboro, Georgia. Question: we should be standing room only here tonight. How many folks are here because you heard about this on TV or radio? Commissioners, that's the state of public news broadcasting in the Atlanta region today. In my opinion, the future of commercial broadcasting, TV and radio, is pretty much done. Their business is selling commercials. I fail to see the public policy that is served by giving profit-making businesses free access to the public airwaves. Charge them a fee, license them, make the fee adequate to fund public broadcasting across the nation. where we can get news. Thank you.
My name is Alexander Waller with Occupy. Mic check. I would like to see the Federal Communications Commission invest in preschool, have a mandated amount of money dedicated to teaching kids how to become part of the process of creating creating TV stations and taking advantage of the many opportunities and stations that are blank now, that through your application were to be actually funded by the Federal Communications Commission, and that money would go to fund. I'm going to say this and I'm going to close. I'm just a crazy jazz musician, and I love the lady in the gold scarf. I'm one of them people that sing and play blues and jazz, and I think I'm like a muse. There was I'm a Christian. I believe in the redemptive power of Christ. But before then, I used to read the Tao Te Ching, and it's the most widely read literature beside the Bible in the world. It's Tao Te Ching. It's part of Chinese philosophy. And there's a poem in there that says, "When things are simple, the man's rags are tattered. He's calm, the fields are high, and everything's at peace. But when things are out of whack, there's a warlike noise, and the people are taxed, and everything is crazy." Right now, things are crazy, okay? And things are warlike. I often think of technology as a backup to the backup to the backup. Okay, we have a backup. Then we have a drive to back that up. But after the backup's backup is a man, okay? How much greed is enough, and how much technology is enough? What happens when your money's caught in the system, when the plug is pulled? Okay, technology for technology's sake is not what it should be about. It should be about a balanced level thing.
Let's talk about technology for a second. And this panel certainly has made their living, for the most part, in the new technology. But there also is the old technology. There's nothing like old-fashioned reporting. And I think all of us in media and radio, television, got a lesson from the AJC this summer with the investigative reporting of the APS scandal and the investigative reporting that is as it always has been, and its impact certainly on Atlanta and the nation has been pronounced. And that is old-time technology, dinosaur technology, if you will, from great newspaper reporting. Agree?
It is certainly feet on the street reporting. It is supplemented by some pretty modern stuff. The APS cheating scandal was actually revealed by a computer analysis of test scores that showed improbable gains in test scores at schools that really couldn't have turned around the scores from year to year, and ultimately revealed that the administrators were falsifying the test results. So yes, it is feet on the street, and it's very important. It is, as I said, something that the AJC really is committed to, and trying to make sure it's a major focus as we go in the future, and I think it will remain important no matter how the news is presented.
And in addition to that, you're seeing a fusion or a partnership, so to speak, with those in the technology space, or those reporters who have mostly an online engagement, partnering with the traditional, I say traditional or legacy media. I don't say old, whatever you say. Especially as I get more traditional and mature. That online engagement. And so you have that partnership because, again, there are people who are, have different interests, who are on the street. You might not be able to, be able to have a beat reporter at a certain place at a certain time, and you have a contractual relationship. So you're seeing experiences and delivery systems are being augmented by these new technologies. The online experience, part of the challenge, I know is how to monetize it. These incredible technologies and the ways we can express ourselves. How do we monetize it? You know the stats about what a lot of these sites, what they are grossing. oftentimes is not enough to support oneself. So how do we monetize that?
Do you want to look into your crystal ball, all of you, about how are we going to get our news here in 10 years from today? What's it going to look like? I will tell you 10 or 11 years ago, a big city like Atlanta working in a television newsroom, there was basically the internet was this pod that was way away from the rest of us. And to think that 10 years later, how revolutionized our lives would be, not only in news, but in all forms of American life, is an extraordinary thing. It is virtually impossible to comprehend if somebody would have told us that maybe in the year 2000. How do you think it's going to look 10 years from now? All of you, very quickly on this subject.
Well, in terms of what we're trying to do and what I think you'll see, it depends on the company. The way it's going to look coming from the AJC is very different from how it's going to look for us. For us, we don't have the resources, nor we ever, to be all things to all people. We decide, so what we are is a paper of passions, and that's what I tell our staff. We look at putting together discussions and conversations and feedback loops around the things we're passionate about. And if you read our paper and go online and look at our social media streams, you'll find out what those things are very quickly. We have writers who are passionate about transportation and transportation issues in this city, Thomas Wheatley, and we do tremendous, in-depth, ongoing coverage on that. We've got a photographer, Joff Davis, who is passionate about activism, and if you want to, and he knows the Occupy Atlanta folks very well, and has put up several galleries and blog posts about what's going on, keeping people updated, because he's passionate about that. I come here and I have a passion for public school system that I covered in Dallas for a long time that I'll be looking at. So I think what you'll see is, at least from publications our size, is figuring out what areas of coverage you're going to have and go deep where you can go deep and not try to be and not flatten out. Try to cover every little thing, but cover the things you can cover well. Aggregate and lead discussions in those areas and try to inform people as deeply in those communities as you can.
Sage.
I first want to say I think there's this false dichotomy, right, of traditional media and new media. It's about people being able to tell their stories. It's kind of one thing. We can't focus on the internet and what's going on out there and ignore the fact that the majority of our country may not have access, that there are issues of the poorest of us that still rely on radio and television. If not, we're going to continue to create the haves and the have-nots. So when we're talking about the future of media, to me we're talking about community-based content. We're talking about people learning to tell their own stories and having access to the ways to share that outside of the people next to them. And that can be either through the internet or through community radios. There's a reason WRFG has been around for 35 years? 38, I'm sorry, 38 years. And that people are supporting them. Because they're actually telling the stories, people are having an opportunity to tell their stories and share their stories. And they're going to support that. I think that's where the future is. It's not someone else coming in, walking the beat, or telling what's going on in my community. It is me learning to be a media maker. It is me sharing with someone else who's going to be a media maker. And then we're going to get a full picture of what's going on.
Ms. Milner, you are in the blogosphere, so you are the front line of that sort of new media. How do you think it's going to evolve? Do you think you're going to be doing a blog 10 years from today and it will look like it does today?
I don't think that it'll be just a sole blog. What I envision is all of those voices coming together and creating their own online spaces that look a lot like what traditional media looks like in terms of the conglomerates of there'll be a conglomerate that has a bunch of different spaces, magazines. Online it'll be a bunch of different spaces that speak to particular people. And so, My Brown Baby would be a part of a larger audience, of a larger a house that would speak to a very particular audience. What I love about the internet is that you don't have to sit around waiting for someone to give you the opportunity to be that voice. Like I said, I'm technologically inept. It took me an extra hour to get here today because I can't follow a GPS. I am technologically inept, but I was able to create a blog on my computer in the middle of the night in my pajamas in bed. And like I said, there are tens of thousands of people who log in and read that blog every day. And that, it costs me no money. It is hard to monetize it and to continue to eat off of that. I'm working on that. I have my side gigs. I've written 19 books, and that's how I make my money. But I envision 10 years from now that we will be able to have a company like a Vanguard, which back in the day owned Honey, Savoy, Heart and Soul, and a bunch of other online spaces that speak to a very particular audience. And so that means that we get to control that. I don't have to wait for somebody to do that for me. I could do that myself. And with the savvy, I can figure out, there was this brother right here in the white sweater from People TV who asked a question and made the point that the streets are full of producers, filmmakers, journalists, editors who are no longer working, who have that expertise. And someone should be opening the door to them. I say open the door yourself and create your own space. You have that expertise. You can do that. There are people online who are creating their own movies. There's a sister online. Her site is called awkwardblackgirl.com. And she has her own television show that she created by herself. She has a little donate button on the side that says, hook me up so I can put the next episode on. And she is being covered like crazy, and doors are being opened for her because she decided that she was just going to create her own space and tell her own story in her own way, and a whole bunch of people connected with that. There are people all over the internet, all over this country who are doing that. And so, frankly, I'm tired of having this conversation of people saying we should be invited to the table. To hell with being invited to the table. Get your own.
And what about it? How different is news going to look in terms of how we get it? I mean, how different will the iPhone look 10 years from now? Will it simply be the same shape and form and do more wondrous things?
I think it'll be a lot different, but I'm not sure that really matters that much. Everyone sitting at this table has an iPhone or something similar. We can all go out there and do live production of content right now. Things like CNN's iReport are really important because they let end users contribute content for breaking news. And I think in some cases the role of traditional journalism will be, one, doing these deep stories like APS, like the Georgia Mental Health System, but also acting as a trusted curator of user-generated content. What can I trust? What's really happening? What's right? I first saw about Bin Laden's death on Twitter. What did I do? I turned on CNN to make sure it was really true. And the other comment I want to make is that
that's not journalism. That's just opinion.
CNN is for journalism.
I'm saying
but CNN can act as a curator to show. They could act as a curator to then pick the ones that they think are correct. That I think the journalism in the future, the trusted journalist, will choose from a wide variety of sources and create a set of trusted content for you from all people out there in the world producing and distributing and putting things in. I also think that we're really early knowing what the Internet's going to do to things. If you look at new media, it takes many, many years from when a new media is invented when it actually takes its kind of final form. When TV first started, it was people basically doing radio broadcasts with a camera looking at them. It took a while for it to turn into the medium it is today. Same thing when radio was invented, same thing when the printing press was invented. So we're still really early on in the Internet game. And I don't think we can say today what we have right now is what we're going to have 20 years from now. And I don't know that any of us can predict that. What I can tell you is that none of us sitting at this stage are going to make that big a difference in it because we're already left behind. We're old in the Internet age.
Speak for yourself.
Can I jump in here for a second?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
To me, what the media is going to look like 10 years from now, it's going to look a lot like how we decide today it should look.
Yes.
We've got decisions facing us now, and I agree there's a lot of evolution, and we don't know how things are exactly going to play out. But I do know if we just continue and watch and say, well, won't it be interesting how it looks 5 years or 10 years from now, I can tell you how it's going to look. There's going to be less community media. There's going to be less openness on that internet. There's going to be more consolidation. We won't have moved on public media. I don't know where newspapers are going to be. I don't think we've heard the death knell for newspapers, but it also could be that era of journalism we had in the 50s and 60s was supported by an advertising model that may never exist again. So these are all things to be taken into consideration, but we have to decide now, because there are trends at work in the new media that are going to take it down that road that radio went, down that road that TV went, and down that road that cable went. And I don't think that's where we want this opportunity creating dynamic broadband technology to go. So it brings us back to now we have to have some broad organizing principles. We have to have a commitment that community media that comes through so loud and clear from everybody talking here tonight. There's a real thirst for this. There's a real demand for it, but it's so damn hard to do and to get the thing supported, and it's not going to happen unless we really begin think creatively about it. Some have said, well, let's start charging fees. Well, that's a proposal, but I would just as soon start thinking about going back and holding folks to the public interest obligations that they got in the first place. A lot of the broadcasters, I think, come around and support this idea of fees if they can buy their way out of the public interest obligations that the Federal Communications Commission once had. We don't have them anymore. But let's think creatively. Community media. Someone made the point before you. A lot of people can't afford to watch peg channels on cable because they can't afford cable. Here we transition the whole broadcast universe from analog to digital. So your average TV station now, instead of just being able to broadcast one stream, can broadcast 4 or 5 or 6. Some folks are taking advantage of that, especially the public TV and the educational TV. A lot of the commercial broadcasters aren't. I mean, you get a radar scope and all that, and that's nice. But if you look at the potential to serve the public interest, or the potential to free some of that up for community media, peg stations over the air, you don't have to subscribe to cable. There's all sorts of creative thoughts we can be having here.
I think one thing also that people are forgetting that we have heard, and Jocelyn Dorsey from WSB-TV, who is a longtime community director, came up to me to remind me, and really didn't have to remind me, of the one guy who spoke and said, how are people going to get TV these days, if you can't afford cable? I don't have cable television, and quite frankly, on-air, over-air broadcasters in Atlanta are terrific. I mean, there's a lot of access for a lot of different kinds of programming, from the French news channel. I read an article not long ago about the number of people cutting their cable bills, just throwing it out, because there is quite a bit of television to be had these days that you don't have to have cable to stay informed, at least informed from a commercial sense. If that's, there may be other ways that you want to try to harvest information, but there is, on-air television like in the 1950s and 60s, and quite frankly, from personal experience, it's a pretty good quality. So let us move on now to some of the questions from some of our people that have been waiting patiently. We appreciate that. You have 2 minutes.
I would like to see if I can sum some of this up in a creative way. My name is Fred B. Man Watson, and I host primetime Good News TV show at People Television Station. I'd like to start with saying this. People of the United States, in order to form a more perfect nation, did establish justice, did ordain war. And was the government lying as people were dying and children on welfare were starving and crying and living in a world that showed no concern, but people were spending more than they earned. They said things cannot remain, times have got lame. There's got to be a change going on. So there was King, Malcolm, and Kennedy. They opened eyes and they opened doors. But a nation went on sleeping, and the chance may be no more. We went back to San Clemente to ponder on a solution as discontent and energy fueled hateful evolution. Things can't remain. They said the times have got to lame. There's got to be a change going on. We had happy birthday. We said happy birthday to the nation. And we said that we wanted to see it through. But to see another birthdays, we knew that there was much we had to do. We had to revive love and understanding and reach truth before we reached the moon, or the trial of our nation was to receive a judgment of doom. We right now look at thank you. I just wanted to say we now look at over 285,000 people that lost lives from 1999 to 2000 to violence. Multiply that by 25 people that went to their funerals. Multiply that by the fathers and mothers who lost their children to prison. Multiply that by 25 families that were impacted. That is a market that could support public access television. And my closing question is, with my 25 seconds left, what will come out of this that will make a difference to the market that I serve as a disabled person with a bullet in my head? How do we begin to reach them? Because they are the people that have to mobilize the movement. As John Lewis and they mobilized the movement during their time, Congressman Lewis, and the civil rights and the human rights movements, the women's rights movements, has to be mobilized by people who have passion. How do we get this message to the people like myself who have the passion to make a movement happen? I want to thank People TV for giving me this opportunity to actually be someone that got a chance to bring a voice to you today, and we were able to, last night, through community activism, mobilize people, and thanks to our mayor, we did not go dark last night, because last night was supposed to have been our last show, but the people in the community mobilized as a result of that. Thank you. So what will happen from this that can help us make a difference and change?
We have Paul Hayes, Deborah Pace, Mary Silver, David Kell, Mr. Samuels, Mr. Terrence, Ivan Wells, Matt Nagel, Dale Joyner, and Drew Clinton.
And a reminder that we are going to wrap up about 8:15. They will turn off the lights at 8:30, so it will take a few minutes to, we want to make sure that no one is in the dark here. So,
Can I respond to the gentleman for a quick moment?
Sure, absolutely, please.
Before you leave, sir, I just wanted to let you know that Artist Change is a local member of Magnet, which is the Media Action Grassroots Network. So if you're interested in the mobilization of communities around media justice, that's one of the things that we feel like here in Atlanta, we decided to become the local, a local membership so that we can begin to really build and organize around media justice. We have a lot of great individual organizations, but we know movements aren't spontaneous. Movements are strategized, and so that's what we're stepping up and trying to help do.
All right, my name is Ron Allen. I'm an MBA from Clark Atlanta University and organizer with Occupy Atlanta. The wealthiest 1% of corporations use media to silence the 99% through consolidation, threatening net neutrality, causing many to ask the question, are the FCC commissioners public service or corporate service? The wealthiest 1% of corporations use untold amounts of money to lobby politicians and regulators such as the FCC to make policies that benefit the 1% of corporations but harm the public and democracy. How has media consolidation to five major companies helped the public and helped enhance democracy? Where are the stories in AJC and other media discussing how corporate media conglomerates are corrupting our government? And so that's primarily two questions to the commissioners. But mic check. With all those that support Occupy Atlanta or that are with Occupy Atlanta, stand up. And the communication workers of America. We the people, are fed up.
We have an online question here that has come. And this question is, why is Atlanta the only city besides D.C. that this kind of meeting is being held? And that's not true. You've been all around the country.
No, I think in the course of the 10 years that I've been involved in these issues, we have been north, south, east, and west. We've been from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, from Florida to Minnesota. I've probably been to, as I said, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 dozen. I don't know how many meetings. We have tried to, and there are a lot of groups that hold these meetings. And if the FCC won't do them, and we do some of them, I wish we could do more. But I've tried to respond, Jan has and others, to community groups, members of Congress, other folks who are holding meetings, and there are a number of them taking place. And again, if you could put all that mass and power and force together in a coordinated way, you could make a difference.
If you would introduce yourself and where you're from.
My name is Billy Sims. I'm a recent graduate of DeVry University and majoring in computer engineering. The internet has become a dominant platform for information, media, and ideas. As such, the public have become the architects of our own destiny. The public voice is now being threatened once again due to legislation going through Congress concerning the internet censorship bill. And I just want to know, as the FCC and as our representatives and you guys holding positions of power, how do you see this and try to meet these challenges so that the public voice isn't threatened?
One of the things that I've learned over the last almost 50 years is the fact that we all have the power to change things in our individual spaces. So what I mean by that in this instance is November 20th, some people call it net neutrality principles, but the open internet principles officially went into effect. That is what the FCC, if you remember, it's still being hotly debated under much pressure, moved in a direction that attempted to help ensure that all of these people in this space, especially those in the creative space, would have transparent, unimpeded opportunities to express themselves so that some of the fears that we've been hearing about don't happen in the online experience. That is in my space, that is with my influence. And so that is why I am saying that whatever your interests, wherever your strengths are, wherever your allegiances and alliances are, we need to individually and collectively work in our spaces where we have the most strength and the ability to change things, to do things. Now, I've related to somebody in Congress, but I can't change much in Congress. But I can change much, I trust, at the FCC. And so it's an affirmation for all of us to know one thing, that the FCC can't do all, even with some of the things they might have jurisdiction over, and that you can do much by individually and collectively going to your state houses, going to your municipalities. You talk about, again, People TV, state franchise laws, that the changes in that help facilitate that. Now, the FCC, you might say, might have changed the ability, but we didn't cast the vote there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dale Joyner. In the early 80s.
No, you are not that tall. You're right.
I'm not sure.
Right.
In the early 80s, I was with Arista Records in London, and I started the first mobile pop school. And we set a precedence by entering into the schools because it was a class culture society in London. I lived there for 10 years. And the industry was so good to me, so I wanted to do something for the children there. So we crossed the barriers there, which set a precedent where we went into the school system to introduce the music to the school system. The only thing that they had there were the children were listening to record players and they were hitting on xylophones and identifying. Well, we started a class there where I taught on the industry as far as how to be an artist in the music industry. My managers taught on the business side, and then we had another young man taught on the music ability as far as with the computers, which set a precedent today. The reason why the music industry enters into the school system was because of myself and my manager. Now, it's seeming like now that has to happen again by entering into the school system. Because when you walk the streets, the community is silent, but yet it is a bomb that's getting ready to explode. It's always the silence before the storm. And if we do not get to the youth, which is silent, and give them something, give them the media, give them a way to address what is inside of them, which is ready to explode, we're going to be in trouble. Just like you said, we're going to be back where we were. We have to get into the school system and teach the children about the media, that they have a voice. We have to get into the school system. And I think it's a great thing if we think about creating a mobile bus that goes from city to city, community to community.
We got to wrap it up here. We still got more folks behind you.
I got 35 seconds.
Do you? Nope, you're over.
36. Oh, I'm over. I'm sorry.
We gave you a little more. Yeah, you're okay.
Into the school system. I'm sorry, her head was in.
You're all right. We got to let you go,
so
though.
much.
Okay.
Let me just say, although we don't have time to get into it right now, you really raise an important subject, and we haven't talked nearly enough about media literacy tonight and the importance of really getting a comprehensive media literacy program going for all of us, but I'm particularly interested in that K through 12 period. There's no excuse at this stage of the game, as far as the internet has come, that we're not teaching our kids not only how to use the digital tools available to us, but how those tools can misuse them, teach them how to identify a reliable source from an unreliable source, teach them how to differentiate fact from opinion. The whole future rides on this. Somebody mentioned before, you don't get a job now with a Fortune 500 company without going on the internet. You don't send the resume out, they won't even look at it. The whole education, health, all of that's moving there, and we're not doing the job with our kids to really make them understand the power of the tools available to them, the power to do good and the power to do bad both.
All right, we are running very shallow on time now. It's about 12 minutes after 8. We've got about 5 minutes left. So I know we have 4 back there. How about one more? And I think, unfortunately, that's going to have to do it because we want to have some closing comments from our panelists. So if you would say your name and keep an eye on that clock.
Okay, my name is Terrence Thames of Collabo Music. I'm an independent internet radio station that I've been doing for about 4 years now, and required to get over 5,000 people on my actual site. Right now I'm at the point where I'm trying to learn how to establish a low-powered FM station within my community to get the word out that, there's a lot of people that look up to me to get their word out on radio. So I'm really trying to combine my community with the internet to get the word out everywhere, because not only is there something happening in my neighborhood and they can they can give their point of view on it and give their answers to a lot of questions, but I came here just to learn, where do I go to get my community involved to get these laws passed so that we can be able to obtain these low-powered radio stations, or to just, get those laws passed that we need to get that.
There's a gentleman right here that the one chewing gum right here that I will reprimand later. In terms of the low power connection, your question, which was your initial genesis, if you will see him, and he will be able to connect you to let you know what the status of that particular item is, and hopefully to move forward on that.
Now, will that be a long time frame in order to get that certain?
See that gentleman right there? He'll be able to right there, the one that's moving around, fidgeting, and embarrassed that I said something about gum. Right. He'll help navigate you tonight. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I appreciate y'all.
All right, we are going to wrap it up, and I'm going to move the clock over here so that our panelists have 1 minute. And we will move down the line, and that way we can close it out with our FCC commissioners, a few of their thoughts and observations, too, about not only tonight, but about the future as well. So, Eric, if you would start it off, we would be greatly honored.
I want to say, my takeaway from this is I'm glad that we talked a lot, that Ms. Crump and Ms. Miller talked about, just as I felt like alternative media in the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s helped fill some of the gaps of the mainstream media, so too can what they're doing, what they're pushing for, what Ms. Miller's doing online, taking the initiative, building audiences, having important discussions that you think aren't being covered out there. I think it's something we're trying to do better. We're trying to be very critical, look at ourselves and say, what areas are we missing? What discussions are we not leading? What things that our audience really wants from us are we not talking about? But in the meantime, we're learning from people who are just stepping in and doing that and saying, here's the discussions you're not having. Here's the audiences that you can be reaching. Here's the sort of things that that's important to your community. And I'm glad they're doing that, and I hope more people take inspiration from that and go forward and do that themselves.
Sage?
Again, I just want to reiterate that this conversation, as we've heard and as Joe Torres and the book illustrates, this is not a new conversation. This is about civil rights. This is about the ability of everyone in our nation to live a full life. It's not just about access to the internet for fun or broadcast. I want to thank the FCC for all of their support and acknowledge and appreciate their continued support on issues of net neutrality, internet freedom, and we are confident that as issues around consolidation arise, that we know that Commissioner Clyburn, you'll be as much a public interest supporter as Commissioner Cox. And thank you, Commissioner Cox, for your support of all these years. I want to say that the FCC can do what they can. There's so much that we can do. We can organize. We can create content. We can go, and we don't need to wait to create a mobile a studio or to go. So we can do that without having to ask anyone. We create the content. It is in the hands of the community. We are the ones who will create change. All they need to do is hold the door open. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm really excited about the passion here. It's great to see community people who know that they have a right to and deserve to be well informed and to have media that serves the community. And so that's inspiring. I really appreciate that we had this session. I will tell you that the media is listening to its audiences like never before. We certainly are at the HAC, and so you really have an opportunity to shape the future of the media, and so speak out and get the information you deserve. Thank you.
I'm going to be really quick. You all know where I stand on this. I think it's time for us to stop asking to be invited to the table and create our own. That's what I'm doing. I know there are a whole bunch of other people out there who are doing it. It may not seem like it's easy to do, but there's so much information. Google is my godsend. Go on it, figure out how to create those television stations, figure out how to create those websites, figure out how to create radio stations. His brother over here was talking about how does he create a space where someone outside of his 5,000 people on his space can listen to what he's doing. There is a way to do that. And there's a way to do that online so that you can, I listen to Hot 97 from New York down here in Georgia on my phone. We have that kind of technology and that ability to be able to do those kinds of things. He's working on that now. And I think what he does is mind-blowing because it allows us the ability to think outside of the box and stretch and find different ways to get exactly what we want without spending a whole lot of money doing it. But you do have to put in that sweat equity. And so, my prayer is that folks will think about what they heard here, think about what you're asking for, and then figure out how to get it on your own.
I just want to close by saying that people may think you have to be a lobbyist or a rich corporation to change the commission and change rulemakings, and that's not true at all. I've co-authored a number of filings to the commission, some of which have impacted rulemakings. I've also worked with community organizations that have done filings. All you have to do is read the things about the FCC, write a well-crafted, it doesn't have to be written in legalese, but a well-crafted, intelligent document that says, here's the issues we face as a community in these areas, and you'll get the commission's attention. You might get the corporation's attention, because I've had corporations do reply comments attacking the comments we made in our filings. And I knew that we were getting their attention then, and it would cause change to happen, and it has caused change to happen. So everyone out there can do that. And it's not as hard as you might think it is. It is not an insurmountable task at all.
Commissioner Clyburn and Commissioner Copps, if you would be so kind to close it out for us.
One of the things I was reminded of when I heard the professor from Emory speaking about a passage in his book about when the powers that be covered the windows on that bus. I was reminded of a story. How many people in here have heard of Sarah Mae Fleming? 17 months prior to Rosa Parks' stand, Sarah Mae Fleming, a South Carolinian, Columbia, South Carolina, was snatched off of the bus in Columbia, South Carolina. She lost her place in history because there was a news blackout in my state, a conscious effort not to cover significant events in the civil rights movement. A conscious effort. They said, if we don't cover it, it never happened. The reason why you hear about me, maybe I'm not as articulate as Commissioner Copps, but as passionate. The reason why you hear about me speaking about our power to do what we can in our spaces, me at the FCC, you in your individual communities, you through People TV, you through your lawmakers. The reason why I'm so passionate about it is because with these emerging technologies, with these fusing technologies, if we are not careful, we will be as vulnerable as Ms. Sarah Mae Fleming was on that fateful day in June. It is important for all of us, not just to talk the talk. You know what's next. I am your partner in doing that. So where we can make a difference in our comfort zones, in our interest zones, let's do that. Thank you.
I think that was as articulate as it was passionate, don't y'all? A couple of quick things. Those who did not have a chance to speak and want to submit something for the written record are welcome to do so. You're free to send it to my office if you can get it together real quick, but after about a couple of weeks, send it to Ms. Glyburn's office and she'll make sure that it gets into the record. I want to thank Jeff Hollinger for doing a spectacular job as guiding us through this tonight.
Thanks.
I thank the Georgia Tech folks and everybody before. I want to thank our crack FCC team, Roger Goldblatt, our sound folks, everybody who worked so hard to make this happen. I want to thank the Occupy Atlanta contingent for being here tonight. You know, it's very interesting that number 99, I talked before about when Michael Powell tried to change the ownership rules, and we heard from 3 million Americans at that time, was 99% of them that were against those rules. So there's some legitimacy in that number. That's right. I think if I would ask, though, a lot of these people, what's the most important issue facing the country right now, if I'd ask 10 of you out there, I might get 10 different answers. It might be education, might be jobs, might be health, might be energy, it might be climate degradation, might be equal opportunity, anything like that. And that's wonderful, and that's good, and that is as it should be. All I want you to take home from this is, if this future of the media democracy that I'm talking about tonight is not your number one issue, it should be your second most important issue, because that other issue you're so interested in is utterly and almost totally dependent upon the media for how it gets presented to the people of the United States of America. If you're satisfied now, when it goes through that big media funnel, that it's getting all the diverse attention that it should, that there's competitive viewpoints being heard, that's fine. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to another word I'm going to say. But if you think that number one issue of yours would benefit from a little more competition between the media, a little more diversity of input, a little more local input, then you've got to put this issue right up there on top, because it's that important to the future of the country. This is about building democratic infrastructure. It's something we've always been concerned about in this country. Way back at the beginning, you can go back and find letters and bills passed by the founders, Washington, Jefferson, Madison. They knew they had this daring experiment, this new country, republic, had never been tried before. Could it work? They knew that people had to be informed. That was the purpose of the First Amendment. But those same people that wrote the First Amendment said, we got to get the newspapers out. So they gave a subsidy to the newspapers. They built postal roads so that you could get the news and information out because they knew that that information infrastructure was so important. So while the technologies change, the times change, the terms of art change, the democratic challenge remains exactly what it was then. And so this is nothing new or novel. It's as American as apple pie, and it's succeeded many times in the past. It's gotten kind of off the roads now, but together we can make it succeed again.
Right. Thanks for coming, everybody. The lights go out in about 5 minutes, so we all better make our way to the lot. Thanks again for coming tonight.
That was kind of a great statement.